Hi, John Wetzel, CEO of Phronema Justice Strategies, retired Secretary of Corrections from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, longest serving Secretary of Corrections in the history of Pennsylvania. I'm here with my Vice President. Maddie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Madeline McPherson. I'm the Vice President of Policy, Research, and Innovation for Phronema Justice Strategies. I'm a former Pennsylvania Department of Corrections policy official and have also worked in legislative affairs in Washington, D.C.
And we're here to talk about staff wellness. And frankly, it's an area where when I look back on my career, I didn't do enough. And so we're really here to create a new conversation and set a new tone for our brave staff who work in corrections and who deserve to have a life outside of corrections. When we say correctional officer, what we're really saying is a mom, a dad, a parent, a coach, a Sunday school teacher, and we should never put our staff, our most valuable resource, in a position where what we ask them to do puts them at a deficit for the rest of their life. And so we have a plan. And let's start by talking about the impact that corrections has on the people who work in it, Maddie. And Maddie, you've spent a career not just working in it, but studying to become a criminologist. So talk to us about what the research says about the impact that the way we approach corrections and the environment we have inside our facilities have on the people we rely on to keep us safe, our guardians.
Absolutely. So there is a decent research base when it comes to staff wellness and corrections and policing. A lot of first responders experience a lot of the same type of job stressors. A lot of the research is focused around job burnout, job satisfaction. So all of these things that affect an individual at work. But importantly, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase, of course, across your career as well, people consider themselves, they do 8 in the gate, or they do 12s maybe. They think that they're going to go and do their job for the amount of time that they're inside a facility, and then they'll go home and go on with their lives. But we find that that's not really what happens. A lot of people experience stressors from different aspects of the job. So you have stressors related to the work itself, which might be, inmate related, that might be related to people who are incarcerated. The truth is that all of these kind of job-related aspects are also then exacerbated by organizational stressors. And so you have situations where frequently agencies are not well staffed. And so if you yourself are responsible, let's say for a housing unit with one other officer, because there aren't any other staff who can also provide coverage, that translates into a different experience than if you had, let's say, 5 officers on a housing unit. Leadership isn't always the best quality that you might hope at your job. And I think everyone relates to that in some way. And so when you have, it's kind of a cycle where you have organizational stressors that translate into occupational stressors that then translate into personal stressors. So imagine all of these things that are affecting you day to day. When you do go home at the end of the day, maybe you're not in the best mindset. And so then you create conflict, or you have conflict within your families, and that creates another thing that then just exacerbates how you come to work the next day.
So when you were reviewing research, what are the things that jumped out at you as far as outcomes for people who work in corrections and the impact it has on their lives and their trajectory outside of corrections?
The biggest thing, we tend to view health and wellness, of course, in terms of physical health, but also mental health. And there are kind of 2 different ways that the stress can get to people. And like I mentioned, there are kind of trauma responses that affect your mental wellness and your ability to do the job, or even your willingness. I myself have experience working as a hospital security officer, and we had a mass shooting event at my hospital. And I showed up differently to that job from that point forward. I felt anxious almost every single time I had to respond to a call. Even though the event didn't happen within the locked units of our hospital, it still affected how I went to work. So there's things like that. But also the physical effects of working not only in a high stress job, but even thinking about people working shifts around the clock. So if you're working overnight, those have physical impacts on your health, where people have high cholesterol, heart disease, gastrointestinal issues, any sort of thing that can really affect your daily ability to kind of, again, show up as a whole person. People don't often have the best health outcomes when it comes to being physically fit. And in corrections, where you don't have a lot of where you rely on your own strength a lot and the strength of the people around you, that fitness level is really, really important to keeping you safe.
All right, and the corollary to that, Maddie, is that there's research-based interventions that individuals can do, not just to be better correctional officers or correctional staff or counselors, but to have an opportunity to have a life outside of corrections, right? And like be better mothers and fathers and coaches and whatever folks do outside of corrections. So talk to us about the research base, and let's draw our experts in to kind of talk about the specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and importantly, correctional staff is not what was going to work for them is not that different from what would work for anyone to be healthy. And so what we're really looking at are improving people's sleep, their ability to eat a good, nutritious square meal at least 3 times a day, to get physically active in ways that are not just when you're on the job, because that can be very job specific and it doesn't necessarily provide holistic fitness for you. And then of course there's the aspect when we mentioned job stress before, is just taking into account the fact that people have interactions with other people that maybe need to be tended to a little bit more. So when we talk particularly about Dr. Conti's work, the work that you're going to do when you're interacting with, let's say, people inside your correctional facility day to day is going to translate outside of your life to improve your relationships with your family and your friends. And all of those things can reduce stress levels, can improve, let's say, your feeling supported by the people that are close to you. And again, going back to physical improvements, people who aren't getting good sleep, that's going to translate into poor outcomes throughout the day. They might make poor choices when it comes to choosing foods that are not fueling their bodies correctly. And then importantly, when you're not physically active or you're not strengthening not just the muscles in your body, but the ligaments and the tendons, you're much more likely to be injured, which then translates to missing work, absenteeism, which is a huge problem when it comes to all of these issues.
All right, let me slow you down a little bit because you just gave like a great stream of conscious on everything that like the staff that we're targeting is experiencing, right? So what she just described is like you're in this artificial, intense environment. You're always outnumbered. A well-staffed correctional system means that we have one correctional officer with 60 incarcerated people, some of whom, it may surprise you and it may not be popular to say, actually want to do some horrible stuff to people, right? So we arm this stuff, and what you just described is all the impacts of that. But the reality is that we have an opportunity that there's strategies that people can use to mitigate the impacts of all that stuff, right? And you started with sleep, right? And it's funny because you say sleep, and if you talk to people in corrections, they giggle when you say sleep, right? Because nobody sleeps. But we've heard a lot already from Jason Henderson, aka Hendo, and Jason, you want to talk to us about sleep discipline and
Sure.
Kind of some of the work you've done around and how these guys or ladies who are doing this difficult stuff, and you go home and everything's still firing, right? You're still thinking about what happened and what you did and this and that. So you want to talk to us a little bit about that, and then Dot, maybe you can follow up with that.
Yeah, we put so much effort into learning how to train physically or even from a psychological standpoint, but we don't put any effort into our sleep hygiene and our recovery. So a big thing for me is when I'd be launching out on operations night after night, I had to get as much recovery as I could as possible so that the next day I could be firing on all 4 cylinders again. And I needed to have a lot of clarity. I needed to maximize the oxygen that was going to my brain. I needed to get my body as calm and relaxed as I possibly could. So when I would go out, I could handle those critical thinking, those high threats type of situations at the best of my ability. Otherwise, if you're constantly deprived of sleep, you're physically run down, you're under all this stress and all this pressure that's coming down on you, you're not recovered possibly or at your best, and you're not going to make the best decisions when those high threats come down the panel.
So Doc, talk about, you've listen, how many places. I literally send this guy into places. If we have an issue somewhere and like we had a facility that nobody would lock down, like we had 130 people who wouldn't lock in, and we eventually got them in, and like everybody's like, Secretary, what are we going to do next day? Oh, we're going to send Doc Conte. Doc will figure it out. So talk about, I mean, we have staff who are working on that unit who deal with this stuff, and then they go home at night, and they need to be a good dad or mom and hug their kids and all this stuff when they literally just fought for their lives or felt like their life was at risk, and then you got to sleep. And then, listen, the reality is they were probably working a double shift, and they got 8 hours. And that means that a half-hour drive time both ways. They got 7 hours, and if they're going to take a shower, which we hope they do, but sometimes you don't have time to take a shower, let's be honest, right? So we're talking about they have to get quality sleep, and they're not always going to have as much time as they need to. So talk to us about that.
I actually just talked to a corrections officer who said, look, I only have a limited amount of time just to even get home. Then I'm on the phone, I'm into arguments. And he said, so I barely am getting any time. The number one thing I hear officers say all the time is, I can't turn my mind off, Doc. I'm like, well, great, that means you're alive. It's not about turning your mind off. It's about having some sense of mental control over what is going on in your mind. That's why the key thing that we teach people is how to take control of that narrative, that self-talk. The more we use these exaggerated words like everybody always, we just produce more stress. And it's already stressful enough. I mean, we're dealing with the most realistic stress. And then to add self-talk that makes it it magnifies it. So one of the things we do is we try to teach people to be accurate with their self-talk, because my goodness, does that change things.
So you guys, give me, like, I need a practical strategy. What's different about what we're doing is these guys get these trainings, and it's this 1,000-level stuff from people who are wearing fancy suits and all this stuff. But I literally just worked a double shift. I had 3 really screwed up situations happen, and there was a moment there where I wasn't sure if I was going to make it home or not.
Yeah, how do you wind down?
And now I got to go home and wind down. Give me some specific strategies. Stop talking about this 1,000-level stuff and is there strategies I can do? Like, Hendo, you're out in the field. You got this mission that you really probably couldn't even tell us the damn details about, right? How do you get enough sleep? You talked about recovery, which is a concept, frankly, that's new to and that we're innovating and introducing to corrections. How do you give our folks in Philly and name the state, everyone is dealing with the same stuff. What are some strategies we can do to help them just sleep discipline? That is a research-based. Recovery is essential. We know that the outcomes that Maddie talked about earlier, the horrible outcomes for folks in corrections, is because we're not doing a good enough job of recovering. What specific strategies around sleep alone? Right. We'll talk about other recovery strategies.
Well, being proactive is number one. Setting a plan. Like every night when I go to bed, I have an hour that I have a build-up, right? I get off my electronic device, I get off my phone, I get off anything. I go old school and read a paper book. I put my phone across the room, so when the alarm goes off in the morning, I have to get up out of bed and go. So now it sets my morning up. Mm-hmm. When I'm laying in bed, you can't stop the monkey mind from jumping around, right? It's coming in. You got bills and stress and family issues and all the other things, work and everything else that comes into your brain that's going to consume your time that you should be sleeping. I just focus only on what my morning routine is going to be, and that's usually my workout. I always work out in the morning. I always set the tone of my day based off of how my workout in the morning goes. And the entire night when I'm laying there in bed, all I'm thinking about is what is my workout in the morning. And I start going through the points of performance in that workout. If I'm doing a squat, I'm always like right hand, left hand, shoulders on, all the different points that go through it. So I'm visualizing, I'm playing out this movie over and over again. So by the time I wake up, I've already got 100 reps in. Not to mention, while I'm laying there in bed, I'm breathing. And I'd like to do a diagnostics. I'm always breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, and I get into this flowing pattern of breathing where I start going from head to toe, relax my hair.
Well, let me slow you down a little bit. Talk about breathing. So talk about, you said in through your nose, out through your mouth.
That's right.
Does that matter?
Yes, it does.
Like, can I breathe in through my mouth and out through my nose?
You can. There's people who have broken noses, they can't breathe in through their nose. So you breathe any way you can, right? But if you have the capability of breathing in through your nose, you always want to do it. And why? The reason is because first and foremost, your nose hairs are designed to filter out all those dirty particles going into your nose. Second, it activates nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, once activated, goes through your nasal passage down into your diaphragm, puts 18% more oxygen into your bloodstream, which helps you think clear. It also takes you from that sympathetic to that parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic being that rest and digest type of system, right? Versus that fight or flight that's in sympathetic. So I want to go right to that parasympathetic nervous system, in through my nose, coming down, maximizing the oxygen in my brain, resetting my limbic system and relaxing my entire body, going down into my diaphragm and coming up and blowing out all that crap that you went through during the day, right? And as I get down to this relaxed system, there's mountain climbers that they did it for 30 minutes a day. They did this style of breathing, in through their nose, out through their mouth every day just for 30 minutes. And a lot of them were able to summit, that whole group versus the other group who didn't do it, were able to summit the mountain without supplemented oxygen. And this was up in Alaska on Denali. Now, if you can just get yourself into this relaxed state of mind, into this calm state, and you're doing a diagnostics on your body, what hurts, what doesn't hurt, you're pushing oxygen into your bloodstream, and you're starting to get those clear thoughts and relaxed. Now I'm just focused on what is my workout pattern, what am I going to do in the morning, and I don't have any stress, nothing else comes in. Once a little idea pops into my head, hey, you got to build a pay, hey, this, I acknowledge it, let it pass, what's my workout, what's my plan in the morning. And then when I get up in the morning and I get on the bed, I'm doing my morning routine and I go to the gym. Once I shower, then I'm thinking about, okay, what I have for the day. Well, I've already had my serotonin levels are kicked in, my dopamine levels have kicked in, my norepinephrine's risen and came back down. Now I can face anything in the day, and I'm in that calm, relaxed state of mind.
So I love the concept about proactive, right? And thinking about what you do in the morning. There's times where I just banged a double shift, I got to work, and I'm probably going to get hooked for another double. So that imagery and stuff you're talking about, can imagery work for like thinking about the drive to work? Thinking about what I have to do in the morning? Like,
I don't multitask. I singularly focus on what exactly it is that I'm doing, and I'm being as
okay, so it doesn't matter what you do.
present as possible. So first is getting in my car and going to work, and then once I do my workout and I'm heading into work, then I'm like, what's next? Okay, I need to walk into the office. I need to have a good frame of mind. I need to breathe and calm myself down so I can take anything. When I walk through that door, it doesn't matter if I'm on the battlefield or getting home after a day of work. I have to reset my mindset. I'm not at work anymore, now I'm going home. Or I'm not at home anymore, now I'm going to work. And I singularly focus on what my tasks are. And those tasks are broken out into micro stages to fill out that macro goal for the day.
So Marty, you add to that.
Hendo hit on something important. Again, if we're talking about sleep, sleep is related to stress. Stress can be controlled through breathing. I've been a meditator since 1970. I've immersed myself in Hinduism, Taoism, Zen. Probably the most helpful initial meditation tactic is something they call shikantaza, which in Zen means counting breaths. But there's a certain way in which you have to count breath. A breath actually has 4 parts. There's the inhalation, there's a slight pause before the exhalation begins. Then at the end of the exhalation, there's another slight pause. Now, the idea is you count from 1 to 10. If you lose your count, you go back to 0 and count again. Sounds easy, it's not. What this does is we give the conscious mind an object on which to glom onto, which is not the chattering mind, that if we leave it alone, this will drive you insane. We have to find ways to stop it. One way is through meditation, through controlled breathing. Another way is through intense exercise. Intense exercise is the greatest stress reliever known to man, greatest natural stress reliever known to man. If you are able to generate intensity of sufficient magnitude, the conscious mind is short-circuited. It's like throwing a bucket of water on a computer.
How can you focus
So
on
let me
anything else?
ask you guys a real question then.
But
I mean,
that's what
and
we
Maddie,
want.
I'm going to come back to you here to ask about the research base. But okay, I just did my second double shift. I know I'm going to have 8 hours off. I got to be back at work. I got a half-hour drive home. I'm driving through a city like Philadelphia. It's not going to be a calm drive home, right? Who knows? It's not going to be a calm drive home, right? So I got to do, in my head, I got to do math, right? I got a week. I want to get some workout in. I want to be healthy. I got to get some sleep at some point. I got to balance all this stuff, right? So give me some strategies I just did 2 doubles. I got a double tomorrow. I got 8 hours off. And I don't care. I'd love to hear 8 or 4 different strategies for what that 8 hours should look like from a workout, food, rest, sleep standpoint, and just whoever wants to jump in first. Just kind of, Doc, you.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that I think Hendo hit on is he talked about this concept monkey mind. So that means our mind like a monkey jumping from this tree to that tree. So our thoughts are dictated by whatever comes up. And the challenge with that is when we're in that space, we're allowing the outside world to determine what's going on within us. And so he hit on the most important point, which is to focus. So what the hands-on thing that everyone out there that you can do is begin to direct your own focus. And that can be done with a phrase. You can start to make sure, look, if we all down 3 energy drinks right now, our hearts would race, would start to mimic anxiety. And then our minds would want to race to make up a story to match our body. So think about this. They're coming home from work and they're still amped up. You're vibing on all this stress. And now your mind is trying to make sense out of that. So you're going, well, I must be having problems at home. I must be having, I didn't resolve this problem at work. And so you come back to that breath. You come back to that focus. And that's how you can be intentional. And intentionality, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's what you're talking about. You're saying, give us a strategy for this 8 hours. Be intentional.
Marty, how would you tell your training? You do online training for John Q. Public, right? You got UPS drivers to correct. I mean, when I was a county warden, right? I ran a couple 100-bed county jail in South Central PA. Right, and I came to Marty Gallagher, read his book, Purposeful Primitive, and really wanted to live a healthier life, you know. So Marty,
came to the wrong house.
I did come to the wrong house, fair enough. But you help people
Yeah.
like our correctional staff in Philadelphia who are you know, I just worked 2 16-hour shifts, Marty. You're my trainer. You tell me I need to sleep. You tell me I need to calm down. How the hell can I do that? I broke up 3 fights. I cut somebody down who just tried to frickin' hang themselves. And I, by the way, on the way out, I checked my phone and there's a new article about how horrible all our staff are who are literally trying to keep people alive who they say they care about. So how the hell am I going to sleep tonight, Marty?
Well, the alternative is you're going to get drunk. Okay, you can't do that. We can't go to chemicals. We got to stop that. Okay, that's the first thing. Number one, we can't anesthetize ourselves, because if you anesthetize yourself, you're not going to work out. You're not going to train. I suggest that you get some sort of physical activity in. That's what I do. That's what we do. That's part of our lives. If it's not part of your life, you need to.
I just work 16 hours. What literally can
Well,
I
and
do?
That's the beauty of what we do.
Yeah.
It's, if you have 10 minutes, we can give you a workout for 10
So
minutes.
what the hell can I do in 10 minutes? I just worked
John,
16
I-
hours. My life sucks. I'm still sweaty.
John, I can get through 4 sets of squats in 15 minutes and kick my own ass. Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's
So
the
can
value
you-
of that?
Huh?
But what's the why would I go home and squat? I could do.
Because
Listen,
it's
I could
gonna
do 3
short
shots.
circuit- it's
I could do
gonna
3
short-
shots of Maker Mark.
John, it's going to short circuit that monkey mind. Okay, you will not be thinking about all that stuff after you finish tying into a limit set.
Right. And focus, talk about that, Marty.
So wait, but you're saying I could go home and do body weight squats
Get
in
up
my
there right
freaking
now,
living
and
room?
I guarantee
We can
you.
make anything into an intense exercise. But the point he's making is that there is no room to focus on anything else. When you're under an intense, so if I say to you, hey, you have to do 80% of your 1 rep max today for as many as you can. Now, that's a balls out training session. I can't be thinking what happened at work. I can't be thinking about my problems that I may have here or there, because when you take that bar off, it all comes right here.
And there's
It's all right there.
a chemical reaction. You have endorphins kicking, you've got dopamine kicking, you've got adrenaline kicks off the process. This is part, but it only happens if the workout is of sufficient intensity.
Yeah, and how many times have you got done with one of those workouts and said, what was I worried about again?
Yeah,
Everything levels out.
I've heard-
Everything gets better.
We've written articles on
Yeah.
this where we talk about the afterglow.
Yeah.
There's an afterglow
It's,
of it.
So importantly, to piggyback off of what Marty's mentioning about meditation, there's something in the brain called the default mode network. And research is showing that when you meditate, somebody who meditates as long as Marty has, if we were to scan his brain today, that center is going to be much quieter.
Right.
And that center is responsible for rumination, for saying, speaking to yourself the way that we're talking about over and over and over again. That thing that you got into today during your shift that you can't get out of your head. If you are a practiced meditator, for example, you're much more able to control that voice and quiet it, whether you're actively meditating or for hours afterward.
Yeah, yeah. And the more you do it, the deeper your practice becomes. It deepens your practice.
So you're saying there's an
faster you
actual
get there.
research base that says that just breathing, just changing the way you choose to breathe, has a
It changes the chemistry of your brain.
measurable impact on my quality of life.
Yes, and it can reduce depression and anxiety and symptoms similar to that.
With our running, with the default mode network, we have between 50 and 70,000 thoughts a day. Research has demonstrated overwhelmingly that meditation quiets that default mode network. Doesn't mean you're going to shut your brain off. You don't have to, but it quiets it down.
Okay.
And also, I think we have the stigma of meditation where we're sitting in some kind of lotus position,
Yeah.
calling out to the heavens or whatever. For me, meditating is just, I can meditate while I'm driving my car.
Yeah.
I'm just breathing and I'm relaxing. I never road rage because I'm listening to Dean Martin. You can't get angry when Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra or some jazz is playing. The whole world can be on fire around me. And I'm breathing, I'm calm, I'm relaxed, and I'm just focusing on what's my task. My task is to get from point A to point B as calm as possible, recover my body as much as possible, relax, let the world spin around me, and be as calm as I possibly can. It's no different when I'm doing that or I'm riding on a helicopter going onto the battlefield. I have to be as calm and relaxed and recovered at every opportunity that I have to recover. I have to take it.
And he talks about when he goes on a mission, his meditation is contingencies.
That's right. I think of everything bad that can happen, then I let it play out how I'm going to react to it. So if I'm driving in traffic, if somebody cuts me off, I'm going to ease on the brakes. I'll wave at them friendly. I'll move out of their way. I'm moving myself away from threats, at least from a mental standpoint. So when anything does happen, I'm already calm. I've already played that out in my head a couple of times through visualization, and I'm breathing, and I'm already in this relaxed state of parasympathetic nervous system.
So one of the ways, I'll get to you in a second, Doc, but one of the ways I could re-describe that is I'm working on a block, right? And I get a vibe. There's an approach I could take where I'd play out what may happen.
That's right.
And my body is going to physically react to that.
Right.
So I'm literally going to experience stress I don't need to experience because I'm making up stuff in my head. Or like you just described, I could go into my discipline where I'm breathing and I'm putting myself in a position. I am certainly still running through the same scenarios, but I've created an environment where I'm running through those scenarios in a place where I'm calm and I'm controlling the outcomes. Doc, hop in there, and I'm going to jump back to
I got two more
research.
things to say.
So it's the difference between creating anxiety and creating strength. There's a difference between I just picture all the worst outcomes and then I do nothing. Or we do what Hendo does, which is I visualize those outcomes, what could happen, but then I visualize a solution. So your brain via your premotor cortex is playing out the situation and the solution. So you're actually solving it within your mind rather than just being a victim to saying, all this stress is happening, I can't do anything. The best performers are able to visualize the obstacles, but, and this is key, then they visualize their way around those obstacles.
So second point.
Yeah, so something that I think is tying into what everyone is mentioning is research around habit forming and developing routines for yourself. So what Hendo's just talking about when he's in the car, and let's say Dean Martin is his relaxation song. You develop a cue that when you are feeling high stress and high strung and you turn on Dean Martin, that's your cue to start breathing or to develop some sort of routine. It can be whatever you want. The same thing can happen when you're strength training or you're trying to get to the gym every single day. If I set my gym clothes out on the bed in the morning, when I get home from work and I see them, that's a cue that it's time to go work out. And eventually, when you keep engaging in the same routine over time, you will be able to not even have to consciously think of those things. But you might need that proactivity in the beginning.
So I think in their training, I don't think I know, in their training and some of the stuff that folks are going to see throughout this taking, this 4-way approach to help, guardians of our society put themselves in a position where they're not only healthy enough to do their jobs, but they're healthy enough to live their life, right? To benefit from the fruits of their labor. You guys talk a lot about mental cues, even like you're under the squat rack, right? Why don't you guys vibe off that a little bit?
Yeah, well, again, an athlete you don't want a lot of, if you're coaching, you don't want to give your athlete a lot of verbal input. That's too much. Give him one thing to hang his hat on: faster, deeper, up, something that he can grasp. You don't want to over talk it. Something I want to mention too is that when the guard is at his station, he can practice shikantaza just standing there, right? He's controlling his breath, he's counting his breath. It gives him something to occupy that mind that keeps the monkey mind from coming in. But at the same time, you have what they call soft eye. In addition to the fact that you're counting breaths, also at the end of each inhalation, at the end of an exhalation is usually when the stray thoughts come in, right? You exhale one, a little gap. Oh, there's where the thought comes in. At the top of it, there's where the thought comes in. So you can practice this on your job. Again, it's just a mental control vehicle, and you can take it with you anywhere you go, and it can be standing, moving, wherever.
And all this stuff is, if you notice, is proactive. It doesn't just happen. It's planning. Like, he's planned out that whole thing. He's planned out that morning routine. Yeah. Planned out his workout. Planned out how I'm going to breathe. Planned out, visualize outcomes and all that. All that is proactive, not waiting for things to come to you and then trying to handle it without the expertise or without the proper plan. So it's just like anybody that's ever done anything great. Those athletes didn't get in the NFL and they just walked onto the field. It was freaking 20 years.
But there's there's cheats we can help them with, right?
Can I-
And then
Yeah,
part
well,
of
the
the
biggest
part of the
thing,
nice part here is we can give them a plan.
Yeah.
And the key is the plan is individualized, right? It works with whatever their circumstances are, but we can help them and develop a plan, or we can write it on paper, and then they just have to walk the walk. Well, listen, what we're talking about is we know that we don't have enough correctional staff to do what the country needs from a correctional standpoint. I mean, there's nobody's arguing that. Yeah. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum there is. Everybody would acknowledge that we don't have enough infrastructure and corrections to do what the country needs, right? So that means we need these folks in corrections, these guardians, to be in a position where they can do things beyond, and they have to be healthy enough to do that. Go ahead, Hendo.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I experienced, especially at the tier 1 level. There wasn't that many of us. Very few of us make it to that level. And so it's crucially important for us not only to be working at our top optimization levels, but also to have good longevity. And that's when I first started reaching out to these guys, is I only have so much time between one operation to the next operation. Like you talked about, I got 8 hours, and there's a helo ride, a driving time in there between, to and from. How can I maximize it? And then they came up with the most simplest way that gives us the greatest amount of longevity and has the most effectiveness for helping us to be at our optimal performance at all times.
Yeah, which ties into what you're saying about, I just got mandated for a second shift. I only have 8 hours off. What can I do with the time that I have? And I think that that's what everyone here really specializes in, is giving you the maximum. I think actually I'm stealing this from Marty. The maximum amount of resources with the minimal amount of time. And then you can get the outcomes that you need. Even if we improve people's health and their mental wellness by a fraction, it's still better than what it currently is.
Well, let me just not let us walk away from this conversation about proactivity and planning stuff without talking about meals and food inside corrections. Because, a bunch of you guys have brought you into different correctional facilities. And when you walk in there, it's not like a healthy food environment, right? So when you talk about being proactive, I would argue that working in corrections and potentially get mandated, proactivity around some kind of strategy around power eating or healthy eating is really critical. Could you all just kind of give us just some thoughts around how to be proactive around meal? I mean, Hendo, you didn't, it was not easy to get a meal in the middle of the desert when you were doing what you had to do. So talk a little bit about being proactive and thinking about how we eat and approach that in an environment where we don't know when we're going to get a chance to eat.
Well, she spoke about habits, and we all tend to get into this complacent world of, I don't feel like working out today. I'm just going to eat whatever's available around me and not being proactive. And then you start getting into this negative habit where your whole life starts spiraling. You're under heavy stress. You're doing the least amount to help yourself through the day. You're not optimizing your performance. You're weak. You're tired. You're not thinking clearly. You're not recovering properly, and you're poisoning your body simultaneously. So again, it's just switching our habits so where we're being proactive of recovering as much as we can at a maximum ability. Put what we put into our bodies to fuel ourselves properly, especially when we're getting in that short workout in, because we only have so much time to get as much of a workout in as we can, and then properly fueling ourselves throughout the day so that we're performing clearly, and also doing every opportunity we can to recover throughout the day so that we're calm and relaxed, we're maximizing the oxygen to our brain. So when critical thinking does need to come into play, I'm physically ready, I'm from a nutrition standpoint, I'm ready and available to be fueled, and also I'm recovered enough where I can play out whatever problems pop in front of me.
I think that something that we also need to consider that people outside of corrections might not be familiar with is a lot of staff eats on site at their correctional facility. So meals are provided. This is particularly, relevant just to security, making sure that people aren't necessarily, staff isn't bringing things in and out as much as they, minimize that as much as you can. But the result, of course, organizationally, is you want to minimize the costs of that food. And often it looks not that different from what incarcerated people might be eating, where it's heavy on starches, it's heavy on cheap ingredients. And unfortunately, I think this is just a broader testament to our culture is we don't love to wait for a long-term result. So when you think about investing in your staff by, let's say, spending a little bit more money to have fresher ingredients, to have healthier meals in your staff dining room, the impact of that might be a couple years off.
Because you don't see it right away.
Right. The retention, you'll see it, but it might be a couple decades from now. And we don't like to wait for that investment. And so I think that if we could somehow, encourage organizations to pilot healthy eating programs on site, not only are you helping people who, again, maybe don't have the ability to go off and get their own lunches or dinners, but when you have people who are working third shift overnight, that circadian rhythm that's already disrupted. I worked with somebody who would eat takeout, I think, every single shift, which made him tired because he would eat pizza or something like that. So then he would drink energy drinks, to go back to what Dr. Conti had mentioned. So then he's artificially revving his body up. On top of that, to deal with the stress and the fact that he's up all night, he's smoking probably every hour. And so you have all of those different habits that are way easier to maintain than a healthy habit, to just kind of roll into that negative cycle of not caring for your body. And then ultimately, you're going to see the impacts of that in getting injured, because that person did get injured at one point, was on workers' compensation for a long time. And then that impacts his ability to financially provide for his family, because he was the breadwinner of his family. And so you see how just kind of the cycle of everything it's so tied together. And if organizations, if agencies can be, and this implicates wardens and corrections directors, if they can make that investment early, even in the smallest ways, you're going to show your staff that you care, which improves morale. It's all connected, and I think that that's something that's really important.
And certainly let me weigh in on this because, I'm longest serving corrections director in Pennsylvania, which is where corrections in America started.
Yep.
Right. So I think I sit at a unique position, and the reality is it's difficult to focus. Like for me, when I got whatever my budget is, but I'm focusing on all these challenges and the politics and all this stuff, part of me says, and frankly, I didn't build the wellness program that we now have. And part of my embarrassment, Jim, you kind of called me out on that saying, what do you mean you don't have a strength and conditioning coach for your agency where you have 16,000 people who literally their fitness equates to their ability to do their job and their ability to live a good life.
In my mind, it's the first person you hire.
Yeah.
And it's a two-pronged, you got the nutritionist and the wellness, strength and conditioning coach, because that's your foundation. And all this stuff we're talking about, I always picture a pyramid. This is the foundation of the pyramid, right? And if we got one stone missing, it's not going to stand, right? And your nutrition, your mind, go along with the breathing, and your intense workouts, right? You got to have all those going at once.
So the thing that brought me really to you all is in looking at the research Maddie did around things like lost time, things like overtime. We talk about the vacancy rates, and then you add vacancy rates to people who are unhealthy. And the reality is, if people are healthy, they lose less time. And the other thing that we don't talk about is that healthier people are more likely to be in a healthy position to interact with individuals, to be proactive, to stop a situation before it happens. And Hendo, when you talk about lost time, I mean, your teams were ridiculously small for the impossible task you were asked to do. That's right. So talk about, and you purposefully selected a minimalist approach to make you healthy enough to be available. Like when you know, I would football coach around sports, like they say the most important ability for an athlete is availability.
That's it.
And what we're talking about, when we're talking about a 40% vacancy rate, that means that 60%, if we can make them healthier and better and in a better mindset. So talk about that, Hendo. You guys, I mean, literally, life and death on the line about your health.
Yeah. So we had to take a look at we didn't have enough time to go to the gym for a couple hours, right? We didn't have enough time to travel and go to all these specialists. So we ended up just making ourselves as self-sufficient as possible, having gyms within our facilities where I would literally walk in there, pop my gear off, set my gun down in the corner, and what is my workout for the day? Well, I only have to do one of the 4 big lifts, right? Squat, bench, deadlift, or military press. Everything else that's added to that is supplementary. So if I can just get one of those lifts in for that day, just get my squats in, that is on my prescribed workout program, then I'm in and out of there in 20, 30 minutes, and I'm moving on. And not only was it effective, but every time I came back to the gym again the following week, I was increasing 20 pounds in every lift.
So you're telling me you can develop a program for 20 or 30 minutes, real time, that translates to someone being in a better posture mentally, physically, and more likely to be at work?
No question.
Duh.
No question in the long run.
Plus they have like
I mean,
60
honestly,
years.
it sounds like a fantasy for a guy who ran a corrections
What
agency.
people don't understand is it's the intensity of effort that matters. So we've all gone to gyms and seen the guy looking at his phone, or the girl looking in the mirror, and the guy looking at his abs and all this. Well, I'm in and out. I'm 20 sets in 20 minutes. That's my goal. I want to get 20 sets in 20 minutes. Now, I've been lifting for 30 years, so I can plan mine a little better and stuff like this. But for these big exercises, what we focus on, and what Hendo just said, those 4 lifts, those 4 lifts work your whole body. Right now, you want the dessert after the main menu, do some curls, do your abs, do all that stuff, that's fine. But if you want to stay as strong as possible and build that suit of armor, that's really all you need.
Meat and potatoes.
Right? But you have to go in there using the same tactics that Doc and Hendo talked about and Marty talked about with the head. It's got to be planned. You got to be ready for this. You're not just going to walk in haphazardly and do it. It's got to be a plan, and you got to follow the progression. And if you do that, then yes, every time you go in, 5 minutes of warm up. 10 minutes of a squat set, a few down sets or whatever, you're out of there. And now
And the only general
you start
rule,
the process of recovery.
the only general rule for longevity is my technique has to be perfect.
There you go.
And that's where these guys came in. I had to completely relearn how to lift at 30 years old. Because up till then, I've just been doing bodybuilder exercises or endurance style exercises. In the SEALs, we thought, long distance running, long distance swimming, stuff like that until we went to war. And then I never ran more than 100 yards in 16 combat tours. So I'm like, what the hell are we doing all this running for? I need to have strong tendons. I need to have strong bones. I need to slow my aging down as much as possible to give myself the best possible amount of longevity so that I can maintain this job, because everybody around me is depending on me.
So every correctional officer who saw you say that just flashed back to when they were in the academy and they got all this training and they got on the block and the shit hit the fan and they said, they didn't tell me or train me for this. What we're literally talking about is building skills that translate to the block, to the break room, and to the home.
Yeah.
So Doc, bring us home on the mental. So I love the thing about putting this, what we're talking about is arming these guardians, right? Mm-hmm. Putting protection on them, just like a bulletproof vest or a stab. I mean, we wear stab-proof vests in corrections, right? Because it's not, I mean, it's stabbing. So talk about arming somebody or bulletproofing or putting armor on their mind.
So for me, mental
this-
health is primary. And I remember hearing you talk about this more than a decade ago. It's easy to have problem identifiers. And when we're in a high stress environment, it's easy to say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. But one of the things you'll hear these experts talk about is, tell me what we can do. And time again, people who are high performers only focus, and great leaders focus on what can be done. Give me this amount of time and this is what I'll do. So we've all kind of hit on the same theme. Be proactive. Understand, instead of thinking, I have to do this, I can't do this, I can't do that, here's what I can do. And when we bring that back, this can help relationships, this can help every aspect of people's lives.
Yeah, let me just sum this up by saying that, one of my favorite quotes is Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's a game plan until you punch him in the face, right? And what we're saying is, look, be proactive. Have a game plan in case you get punched in the face, right? And if you've been punched in the face a bunch of times, then you go, okay, I just got punched in the face.
I think something else that's really important to bring up is that we don't just focus on being proactive in the pre part of the workout. We also get into the when you're on, but most importantly, we get into the post. And it's not just the recovery, but those of us that have been in combat don't have a monopoly on PTSD, right? Anybody that has a lot of stress can have some type of a post-stress issue. And the big ones that I was diagnosed with was I had anger issues, I had insomnia, I had problems getting along with people out in society because I felt detached from them, and lack of excitement, like nothing was really exciting to me anymore because my job was somewhat depressing. And it was exciting too because at any given moment I could be under attack or in a fight. These are all the same things that guardians in prisons go through, right? They all have insomnia, they all feel detached from the rest of society, they all have issues getting along, and they have anger issues, right? And once we learn how to mitigate a lot of our stress, then we don't have these post-traumatic stress issues. Because all of us run into trauma, and all of us have stress. So if we can mitigate that on the tail end by being just as proactive as that as into our pre-workout, into our recovery, into everything else, then we're all around more well-rounded human being.
Doc, hit us on mirror neurons and why correctional staff who are working on a block, you may not even be involved in a situation, but see it and experience it and have the same trauma impact. And then Maddie, bring us home on the research thing, and then we'll.
I'll summarize this study in 2 minutes. They were Italian neuroscientists studying the macaque monkeys, and what they saw was this: they hooked their brains up to a brain scan. If they grabbed for a bottle of water, specific neurons went off. If they grabbed for car keys, neurons went off. Well, one day they were at lunch, and one of the researchers, he grabbed a bag of peanuts. The monkey sitting there, he didn't move. His brain was still hooked up. And what they noticed was the neurons for peanuts went off. What they found in that moment is called mirror neurons. In other words, this is the root of vicarious learning. When we watch other people do something, we're doing it. Now, here's why this plays such a vital role when we're talking about wellness. All day long, when you're walking through a prison and you're seeing people going through what they're going through, even if it's at a basic level of being in an 8x10 cell, your brain is processing that. So as you're seeing all the stuff that's going on, your brain is experiencing it vicariously. If you don't take the time to take care of yourself, your brain is experiencing what Hendo said, that PTSD, some sort of a post-traumatic stress. And so this is why being proactive about our mental wellness is absolutely critical. It's
Maddie,
absolutely
wrap us up.
Yeah, well, I think it's important, of course, to acknowledge that when you're working a block or anywhere in corrections, you need to be physically fit, you need to be physically ready in case something happens. But more importantly, I think we want to put a little bit more emphasis on the fact that we want to use physical wellness to support mental wellness. And when it comes to interacting with people on the job, truthfully, you want to rely, hopefully, on your ability to verbally de-escalate somebody, to speak to an incident rather than having to get physical. Physical encounters you want to try to minimize them, of course, because that's how you typically have, you're more likely to have injuries or anything like that. So if you can talk to somebody in a way that solves a problem or that builds rapport, which is an art form in corrections, that is what we want to go for. And so when we're specifically talking about, I think, physical fitness in this context, it's really to get back to where Dr. Connie had started us, which is that when you have the ability to kind of calm yourself, or let's say that your resting heart rate is lower because you're in better shape now. You're able to sleep more soundly at night, and then you're much more ready, as Hendo had mentioned, when you're on the job to have those neurons firing quickly and to be able to get to where you need to get with that interaction, intervention, whatever it might be that you're dealing with. You're much quicker on your feet mentally. And then you don't have to rely so much on physical interventions, which again, just kind of increase the risk of injury, among other things, which then leads to people being out of work.
So just to wrap this up, don't accept the fact that it's just, you have to accept all the outcomes and the terrible outcomes that happen in corrections. It doesn't happen. You can make decisions in your life and how you approach it to be proactive and to be proactively healthy so you can be who you want to be outside of corrections. So Doc, we experienced something that, everybody experienced, COVID, and certainly March 2020 meant something. But in corrections, I would argue, it's there's a handful of sectors that really were disproportionately on the front lines, on the razor's edge of the most difficult circumstance in your life. And frankly, the impact of COVID is still, the artifacts of that are still present in not just in the field of corrections, but in the staff of corrections who are ignored. Like if you Google corrections reform, you will see 0 articles on how we make our staff healthier or how we create healthy environments, right? So I want to make it explicit, why it's so important that we shift our focus and we really make significant investments, create a strategy to have our staff be healthier, and healthier staff create a healthier environment. So let's talk about what you observed as a psychologist who spent your life working with. Frankly, you worked on the other side of the bars, right?
Yeah.
So talk about what you observed with our staff, but start with talking about how you came to corrections and all that stuff.
So one of the things that I saw, coming back into corrections, the way I began in corrections was I did some stuff undercover. I just kind of went in, in my informal wear, jeans and a t-shirt, and sat in and I watched how people were treating people. And so it was interesting because the guys that were in the groups, I sat in on some groups for people convicted of violent crimes. These guys, they had to write a letter of accountability, right? So what they did was they'd look at each other and be like, oh no, erase this, just write this. And I'm sitting there this is really what's happening. They'd turn the letter in and the teacher would say, oh, you're accountable. This is an accountable person right here. I said, this is BS, right? And then on the flip side of that, I saw the teacher kind of being condescending. You guys are psychopaths. You're never going to change. So I realized, look, we had to change it on all aspects of it. So I had a successful center out west where I did that stuff. I came back to Pennsylvania, more than a decade ago. I met you. And when I started to go into our prisons, listen, we had to change all of it. We had to take care of our staff. Our staff's doing intense work. And as I say to people all the time, unless you're in corrections, you don't understand the intensity of the work they're dealing with day in, day out.
Can I pause you for a second? Because I think one of the things that we lose is that we focus on the environments in corrections and we want to be tough on crime, right? And honestly, I'm not saying that in a pejorative term. If someone commits a crime in our community and risk, we're all parents and all that stuff. If someone is going to be risked, I want them to be held accountable. But the environments that we've created to achieve that accountability are not the healthiest environments. Right. And the people, you guys refer to them as guardians, right? These are people who we literally, as a community, as a society, as Americans, we pay to protect us and make our lives safer. And those environments that you talk about, you go inside prisons, have an impact on them. So talk about that, even pre-COVID. Just talk about.
Yeah, so I think a couple things that I think are profound. One is this: if people have taken one path to get to where they are, How can we expect that they're just magically going to just change that path unless we teach them something different, expose them to something different? So that's really where reform begins. We say, okay, one thing led to the next in the story of all of our lives. And that's true with people who are incarcerated. So if one thing led to the next to get you here, what can we teach you to take you in a different position? Okay, so that's one aspect, and that's huge. But then here's another thing, and I think this is profound. So Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, in his poem, A Psalm of Life, he said, "Our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave." In other words, we're all going to have our final moment of a life. And if we know we're going to have that final moment of life, we're all going to want peace in that final moment. And we're not going to sit in our final moment and go, "Oh man, I wish I got over on this person." Like in our last breath, we're going to want to know that we have peace. And we can't just get that magically. We have to practice it. So this is where this kind of all sets up. So if we're going to teach our incarcerated population a different path, a path of personal growth, then we know that we lead by example. None of us likes hypocrites. We don't like people who say, "Oh, you do this, but do as I say, don't do as I do." So we have to lead by example. So our staff, it's the most important thing, most crucial aspect, live the message you're teaching. You are a role model, so let's embrace it. Let's become the best version of yourself. So that's where these programs come from. I want to flash forward to 2020. So in 2020, we have these lockdowns. And this is something that, this is one of the greatest leaders I ever met. And I was in one of the prisons. I was in one of our 24 state prisons. And I'm in there and I'm going cell to cell and I'm noticing that the same message was getting delivered and getting messed up, like the telephone game. I'll tell you, you tell him, you tell him. So what I did was I set up a fireside chat in that prison. And I said, the superintendent, sit down, and I said, tell them what's going on.
So superintendent is like a warden or the person who runs the prison. I just want to make sure people understand because sometimes the terminology is different.
Right. So the warden, superintendent, we sat down, we said, let's tell your institution what's going on. And I'll tell you where this comes from. Lake Hendo, I fly lots of places. Maybe not Lake Hendo. I don't really like flying as much. I'm not jumping out. So I'm not as brave as Hendo. So I don't really like flying. But one of the things I notice when I'm flying, I'm like, when we hit turbulence, can't the pilot just come on and say, "Hey, listen, it's no big deal. It's just turbulence." They don't tell us. And telling us, I think, would help my anxiety. So I thought about this from the perspective of incarcerated individuals. I thought, why not just tell them what's going on? We have these lockdowns. They're unprecedented and nothing like we've ever seen before. So we did this in this one prison. It went really well. Well, he was sitting there as Secretary of Corrections for the entire state, and he said he could see my leg would always be going 100 miles an hour and have an idea. And you're like, "I know what's on your mind, Doc. What's going on in your mind?" And I said, "I think we should make these fireside chats mandatory. I think the whole state should do them." And I'll never forget this. He sat back, he thought for like seconds, and he was like, "Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. They're mandatory." And so we made people communicate. And let me tell you how this relates to what we're doing. It began with saying, if we can't just guess, we need to know what's going on. So that means communicating with our peers, communicating with our workers, but then communicating. This was the crux of all of it, to communicate what's going on. So our workers who are so stressed out, overworked, communicate, understand what's going on. And that's really the basis of what I think a great lesson we learned.
Yeah, and let me take what we learned during COVID and put it to real life, and then translate that to teaching people, giving correctional staff in particular a tool to be proactive in their health, in their personal health. And one of the things I described what you said during COVID is what we learned during COVID is that in corrections and in a bunch of fields, we didn't focus on proactive health or proactive wellness or proactive management or anything. We just did our jobs. We just did what we did day to day. And then COVID happened and we got locked down and this and that. And we all got kind of detached from support networks. And I mean, gyms closed down and all kinds of stuff. And we figured out that there's just not some magic pill that's going to make us better. And there's not just some stuff. And that we have to be proactive and we have to work at being healthy. And that being unhealthy creates more unhealthiness, right? So I think what we both observed during COVID is that, one, the correctional staff in general has been a group who's frankly not gotten the respect or the esteem that they deserve. I mean, this is a group is what I'd say to my law enforcement colleagues, and I'm no disrespect to anybody, but when law enforcement, trust me, difficult job, risk your life, this and that. After they're done with all that stuff, they drop them off with us, and we don't have weapons. So just saying, no disrespect, but it's the toughest and most difficult beat in law enforcement, and the reality is we haven't been given the tools.
No.
And what we learned during COVID is that what we care about, what we need, is we need healthy people doing this difficult work, and we haven't set our staff up to be healthy. And so let's talk about how we can learn lessons from other sectors. And we're sitting here with Jason Henderson, who's been 30 years in the military, special operations, tier 1, like the top special operators in the world. And their literal construct is we have an impossible situation. We need you and a couple of your buddies to go in here and do something that's impossible. We expect you to succeed every time. And we're not going to give you enough resources. And that's the literal situation that corrections in. The difference is, thank God, our country has invested a bunch of money in training and giving you the ability to help you optimize people. So what we're saying here, what both of us, what we've observed during COVID, what we've observed during our entire career, is that we have people, literal guardians of America, who are taking care of ensuring that our corrections facilities are functioning. If you look at countries and stabilization, you can't have a stable country literally without a correction system, without checks and balances, and without law. And we're not arming them with the ability to succeed. And I think that we can learn from what we've invested in our best warriors and people like Jason Henderson or Hendo, as we've learned. So Hendo, talk to us about, you heard about what we've experienced, what I've put my staff through, what we've had to do. Talk about where you guys came from, kind of how you came to this worldview, and specifically, we're sitting up here just to contextualize this with Dr. Christian Conti, who's an anger management specialist, who started his career by working with people who've committed violent felonies and helping them create a new identity and a new person, a new trajectory, not just for them, but for their families. Fortunately, we were able to connect, and I brought him into Pennsylvania. And we ended up shifting our work fairly quickly onto making sure our staff were able to do this. We also have with us Jason Henderson, who was a special operator, tier 1, with the Navy SEALs for 30 years in the military. And frankly, a great analog and a great example for all of us to understand how we can make humans operate at their optimum level
in high stress environments.
In high stress environments like prisons and jails, by the way, and not just survive, but maximize their opportunities and have a life outside of here.
Yeah.
And part of what got Jason and Hendo and our military and our best warriors to where they needed to be to do what we asked them to do, so we could all live the life we live, is bringing in people who helped you do that, and that's Marty Gallagher and Jim Steele. So let's kick it to them, and you guys just kind of vibe off what we talked about.
When I reflect back on how I even got in this seat in the first place, it started off I was doing a security assessment of the prison in Philadelphia. And as I was getting a tour and walking through, and I was writing down all the security concerns that they were presenting to me and ones that I was witnessing, I talked to the staff, who is great people. They said, well, one of the big problems we have is we're not getting enough rest. We're not getting enough, care. People aren't looking after us to give us opportunities for good wellness. They showed me a stack this high of people that were missing that day from work on this list. And I was thinking to myself, I haven't been sick in 30 years. I've never missed a day of work. I had 7 surgeries. I'd get surgery on Friday and be at work on Monday. Whatever I could do to make sure that I would show up, because everybody there was depending on me to be there. So I had this deep intrinsic feeling that I need every opportunity to be at my optimum best self, but also so that I'm dependable for everyone around me. And so I started reflecting back. Well, how did I get here? How was I able to operate for 30 years? I never took a staff job. I never took an administrative role. I was kicking doors all the way until the minute I retired. And the way I got there was I go, okay, well, let me reflect back to when I was in my 20s. And I remember a lot of guys were breaking apart back then. That's when we did these long distance runs and long distance swims. And we had this thing where let's do 1,000 push-ups. So it wasn't even revolved so much around physical strength, but around psychological strength. How far could we push the human body, right? But it wasn't optimizing us for combat. In the 2000s, when we started going to combat, we were like, okay, well, I'm falling apart. I can't go for long distance runs. I don't have time for it, number one. And number two, it's not helping me on the battlefield. In 16 combat tours, I never ran more than 100 yards. Everything was instant. So I'm like, okay, well, how do I get the best longevity out of my body? What am I seeing? I'm seeing where I have to pick people up. I'm seeing where I have to get into this combative type of situation in short bursts. I'm seeing where I need to drag my fellow brother that's fallen into combat and carry him away from a situation and get him away from the threat. I'm seeing where I need to control several individuals and hold them down. And so it's these short bursts of maximum strength. I'm seeing where I'm falling through roofs and things like that. So I need my tendon strength to be really strong. I needed my bone structure to be really strong. And so what we did was we
Can I
reached out.
pause you for 1 second?
Sure.
Because let me just describe what you heard. What you heard is that Hendo observed what they were required to do, and had the ability to look objectively and understand that what they were training folks to do was not consistent with what we were asking them to do.
If you don't impose the demands,
That's right.
So I
They're
think
never gonna
it's a
meet
real
the demands.
analog for corrections in two ways. One, we're asking our staff to do more than they're capable of doing. If we literally sat back and wrote down what we asked them to do, what they have to do by the Constitution for the individuals who are incarcerated, there's no constitutional requirements for how good we treat our staff, by the way. There's a constitutional requirement for how good we treat incarcerated people, but there's no constitutional requirement for that. But if we looked down at what we asked them to do and looked at how we trained them to do it, there wouldn't be a lot of overlap. And that's what you just described.
Right.
So talk about how you first of all, appreciate the fact that you were confident enough to say we can do this better. Even though you talk about negative outcomes, you were still the best in the world. Right?
That's right.
So to be clear, they were still the best in the world. But you looked at this and said we can be better. And so talk about that and how these guys helped
sure, you
you.
could be more optimal. Is that was sort of what you were thinking? Like, how
Well,
do we
I had to have
optimize?
longevity. We were performing at an optimum level for short periods of time.
Right.
But now we introduced high stress, high threat, high trauma to ourselves. So I'm like, okay, well, how do I be optimal in this type of environment? And so we brought in I was fortunate to be at a command that had a very high budget. So I brought in experts from across the world. And we actually had a huge symposium.
So what kind of
these
experts?
Well,
Are you talking about experts in the skills you needed?
well, proclaimed experts and what was needed for us, right? So they're saying, okay, well, we work with sports teams, we work with these guys.
So be
those
very
guys,
specific
Olympic
about the
athletes,
skills
right?
you needed.
So yeah, we were saying, well, here's what I need. I need to have the best longevity possible. I need to be very strong. I need to be able to have great anaerobic ability where in short bursts I can be able to handle any kind of combative situation that may come across the board. And I also, not just physically, but psychologically, I need to be empowered and be as mentally strong as possible so I can endure all these traumas and stresses that came. So when we brought all these different people, a lot of them were just gimmicks. A lot of them had little exercise equipments and things and thises and that's. And one of the guys that we had brought actually had brought Marty in. And Marty didn't say much. He sat in the corner and was kind of quiet. And he was just kind of shaking his head during every presentation. And I'm thinking the same thing. I mean, these guys are all clowns. Like, they're all just marketing. They're playing a gimmick. They're trying to get the big government
And
contract.
frankly, we see a lot of marketing and gimmicks and corrections, and not a lot of stuff that's measurable, actionable, feasible, and we're actually going to get outcomes and feel the benefit.
And I just wanted empirical evidence. I wanted somebody to say over a long period of time, this is where you're going to be and this is what you need to do to get there. And so I went over and chatted with Marty and I'm just like, hey, what's your deal? And he gave me the full rundown. I'm like, here's my situation. I have low amount of time to work out. I've got to maximize my strength, bone density, tendon strength. I need to get as great amount of longevity as possible, and I need you to compact that down in the shortest period of time, and I need empirical evidence backing all of it up.
No problem.
And that's where they came in. And so even then, I'm not just going to take people's word for it. So I vetted them, and I'm like, okay, well, train me for 12 weeks, and we'll see where we're at. Because I'm taking off to deployment, I'm going to combat, and I'm going to use your techniques overseas and on the battlefield. And I'm going out every night, doing raids, minimal amount of sleep. Tell me how to get there. And he walked me through the whole process. I did it. And not only did I perform at a high level, when I came back from that deployment, I made my entire team do it. And not only did they perform at a high level, nobody was injured, everybody was healthy and performing at a peak level throughout the entire deployment. And then that just became our gold standard.
And the feedback.
So I
you
wanna-
got, what was the feedback from the guys after doing that type of program versus the endurance stuff that they had?
Yeah, well, they were saying we're healthier, we're stronger, we're having less injuries.
Recovery probably too.
Our recovery is twice
Yeah,
as fast.
yeah.
And we're doing it in a minimal amount of time.
They're probably not dreading the endurance workouts. Now it's fun.
Yeah,
You go in there and get
that's
strong.
So-
You're
so
in
that
and
was
out.
that was a niche thing, anyways.
So let me
the people
unpack-
who did those that were
Right.
really good at the long endurance type of exercises weren't really fighting in wars.
Got it.
They were the ones sitting back, staff officers that were like, "Hey, this is mandated. We're doing this long run, swim type of
Right.
thing." But they weren't fighting anybody. They weren't getting impact. They weren't receiving any trauma.
And it took you, who's in the mix,
Right.
to say, hey, specific adaptations for imposed demands. If we don't demand it to our bodies, we're not going to be able to do it on the field. On the
That's
combat.
completely correct.
So let me unpack this in corrections, and then I'm going to ask you guys to talk about what you did. But let me translate this to corrections, because what he just said is what I said when I was a CO0 at the bottom of the ladder. And I said, oh, they got a new freaking memo. This memo came out from this warden who never worked a block or hasn't worked a block in 30 years and doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's asking me to do this way. And there's no way in hell that's going to work because he has no idea. And that's, I'm paraphrasing, but the reality is so much of what the direction was so detached from what actually works that it didn't work. And so fortunately, and in corrections, we rarely have enough budget to bring the best and the brightest in. But fortunately, in your context, the work you guys were doing was so important. And again, I'm going to come back to impossible. Because I'll tell you, when you're sitting on a block and there was supposed to be 2 officers, like the correctional officer who's sitting in Philly at CFCF right now today, who was told that they're going to have a second officer and a rover on that block. And they're sitting there by themselves with twice the number of incarcerated people on that block than they were supposed to. That's not an ideal situation.
No.
So whatever they thought up to prepare them to not just manage that situation and provide what they need to and do the job, but also to go home and have a life, right? Not realistic, right? So that's the analog. So you turn to these guys, and why don't you guys just start talking about some of the ways that we can optimize folks, and we can acknowledge the brutal reality of where they're at. One of the favorite quotes I have, or favorite things I discovered in reading the book Good to Great, right? They talk about Admiral James Stockdale, who was the highest ranking naval official who was a prisoner of war during Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And the coolest part is they talk about this interview with him, and I can almost visualize it in my head because they're interviewing him and they said, tell us who survived it as prisoners of war and who didn't. And they actually call this a Stockdale paradox, right? Because he said, oh, that's easy. The people who thought they were going to get out survived. And you go, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you would think that optimism is significant in somebody being successful. But what he said is, there's a bunch of people who said, oh, I'm going to get out, let's say it's in September. I'll be out by Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving would come and go. Oh, no, I'm going to be out by Christmas. And eventually their spirit would be broke, right? And what he observed is that they didn't acknowledge the brutal reality of where they're at. That optimism is critical and important, and positive thoughts and not using extreme negative language and all that stuff is critical. But what's also critical is that you acknowledge the brutal reality of where you're at. And the brutal reality of where you're at is while you were performing at a level higher than anybody else in the world, it wasn't freaking good enough. And the brutal reality for a correctional staff across the country today is that we're not given the resources we need to do what we're not asked to do, have to do from a constitutional perspective. We're not giving those resources. But it doesn't freaking matter. Because at the end of the day, we're measured by whether we do it or not, whether we have the resources or not. And so the answer for you guys as Navy SEALs, and the answer for our folks that we really care about, the folks who are working today in Philadelphia, who are working today in Alabama, in Texas, in California, in Pennsylvania, in all these states who don't have enough staff to do what they're constitutionally required to do, is that we have to make them better. Yep. And we have to help them be the people they can be, not just for the job, but for outside the job. So let's pivot to you two who were brought in to try to help these warriors, these people who are literally risking their lives so we can do what we do. How can we make them better? And how can we make our folks who are working inside jails and prisons better using the kind of techniques we employ to optimize a human being?
Well, what I did was I started talking to the operators, getting the feedback. It morphed from, originally it was a strength program. Over time, it morphed into what I considered it the super soldier program, because we wanted to maximize more than just strength. We wanted the nutritional element, the cardiovascular element, all these things interplay to raise the entire level. If you just stay within resistance training, you exhaust all the possibilities of the box. At some point, you have to step outside the box in order to improve.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Oh, you use all the potential workouts in resistance training. Well, maybe you need to move to nutrition and some cardio to alter your body fat percentile. If you lift as a 242-pound lifter, I'd rather be lifting with a 10% body fat percentile than a 20% body fat percentile. That's logic. And we know how to do that. That's common knowledge for us. And within the 4 areas that we stress, again, resistance training, some sort of cardio, which could also be sustained strength. Did I say nutrition already, Jimmy? And brain training, the psychological aspect connected to the transformative process. All these inner elements have to be balanced and taken into account. Better a little bit of each than a whole lot of any one. Now, how does that apply? I work with the best in the world. I work with the best military, and I work with the best strength athletes. And
before you talk about how it applies to John Q. Public, talk about your work with the world's strongest human beings.
yeah,
So talk about applying these concepts work to get 1,000-pound squat, right? Which is unthinkable, and also get the world's best warriors even better. So talk about your work with strength athletes.
well, I mean, I was mentored by a world champion. I was a world master champion, and I created world champions.
And how does this concept of what Hendo talked about?
That's where I made my bones. But then you spill over into other areas. You have to if you want to progress past a certain point. I kept my career at age 48. I squatted 722 at 220. I mean, I was
Critical elements of that. Hit us the critical elements of what you use to build a warrior and build an athlete and ultimately build a correctional officer.
All 4 of the elements you want to have simplicity and minimalism. You take your eating back to organic food, obviously. Let's go back to the foods that we ate back before agriculture. Agriculture is only 10,000 years old. It's a relatively recent invention. The human body was designed to run on protein, fiber, fat, some sugar a little bit, but starch carbs, no. Refined carbs, no. That's bad fuel. Got to get that out. That's the first thing. If you don't get the refined carbs out of your diet, you're really not serious. That's like the first bus stop in terms of nutrition. If you don't do that, everything else is you're just rearranging the contents of the box, and nothing's going to change. You got to detox. Right?
So you
That's
have to
nutritionally.
fuel
You've
the
gotta
body.
have
No
carb.
matter what your body asks your body, if you're asking your body to go to work and probably do 3 doubles this week, and you have to do a round every half hour. I mean, when we break it down to the critical elements of what you have to do, you have to have your mind in a place where you can react to certain situations, you can anticipate certain situations. You're saying the first thing you have to do is make sure you're giving the body fuel, even
No, I
if,
say the
or
first thing
especially
you do- I
if.
say the first thing you do is train.
Okay,
Train.
so walk us
Institute
through.
some sort of training. It has to. You should have a cardiovascular and a strength training element. Now, the cardiovascular could be what we call sustained strength interval training, but you need to establish some sort of a training basis. Also, that again, I go back to this whole psychological aspect of
So
intense
stick on training and slow down for someone who, let's say, look at me. I'm a block officer. When I was younger, I used to work out. I haven't worked out in a long time. I'm working a bunch of shifts. Tell me how I can't even think about training. I'm barely able to talk to my kids when I get home.
First bit of advice: more rotisserie chicken, less Cheetos. You know
More
what I mean?
rotisserie, less fried chicken.
So it does start with food.
Oh yeah, the foundation of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you guys?
Training's more important, right? Yeah. If you are there fit inmates,
Certainly fit inmates.
and what kind of diet are they on? Well, what the advantage they have is time. They have time to work out all day long. So the fuel has to be secondary to training and prioritizing. So I would always prioritize training first.
All right, so let's start with training and talk about.
May I make a quick point on nutrition? And this is interesting. It's you know they have a cliche, prison muscle, and if you look at any of the shows or any of the reality shows, prisoners are getting rocked out coast to coast. They're muscled up. How is it that they're doing this? They have the worst equipment and they have the worst nutrition. Yet there's a cliche, prison muscle. Okay? It's counterintuitive. Yet they're getting better results than high-paying clients are using fancy personal trainers in the outside world. It's a very interesting dichotomy. Now, it could be maybe there's an overemphasis on nutrition. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the easiest way to sum up nutrition from my point of view is if man makes it, don't put it in your body. And we went to the Olympic Training Center and we took a look at what foods they were eating, and they said, look, it's simple. We just get locally sourced fresh food, and we don't process anything, we don't get anything that's manufactured, and that's what we put into our athletes' bodies.
Yep.
And it's really that simple. And to keep fueled throughout the entire day, when you've got to make that conscious decision of, do I eat a couple slices of meat from last night's dinner, or do I get this bag of chips? And that fat and that meat and that protein are going to fuel you, and this is going to make you depressed and angry and sick.
So let's make it practical on food. I'm a correctional officer.
out. You gotta
Hold on.
switch out.
Let me give you the scenario, and then you guys vibe. All right. So
And remind me, I want to talk about individualizing programs before I forget.
yeah. So let's swath this up like this. Let's start talking about a nutrition for a correctional officer who's in a place who doesn't control what food they have.
Yeah.
They're going to likely go to a staff dining room that will have some kind of salady choice, some kind of protein, and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? The snack machines, and Hendo, you talked about this when we went to Philly, right?
Yeah.
You looked at the snack machines and you said,
It's filled with junk.
filled with junk. So as corrections administrators, do yourself a favor. Walk through your facility, what kind of stuff you're offering. But if I'm a guy who's going to probably, if I work 6 days this week, so don't assume that correctional staff do not work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, 5 days a week, right? A lot of them work in 6-day schedules, 7-day schedules. If they're not working that many days, they're certainly working 10-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts, right? So given this artificial, unusual environment, just talk about some decisions they can make from a nutritional standpoint. Like, it's not like the perfect, but this is better than that. So Marty, you started talking, you kind of, instead of KFC, do rotisserie chicken. So talk about the foundation of food,
Yeah.
and just give them some practical, actionable, feasible advice that we can get measurable results from.
I'm going to give one point and then I'll turn it over to Jimmy. Routinely obtains 8% body fat percentile when he competes. So he knows the true torture of obtaining a truly low body fat percentile.
So Marty, say
But
that
let me
again.
just-
But what's a normal person have with body fat, and then what's 8%? Because people don't have that context.
Oh,
Yeah. So just but do that because we're cutting everything. So say a normal person has a normal body
25%.
fat percentage is
20,
20,
18,
25%.
So start with that. Just say that same statement, but start with that.
I said around 18.
Yeah, it's 18 to 20% body fat percentile.
So start that So normal person has
normal.
18% body fat. Jim's able to achieve 8%, and then go. from there.
Yeah. My one clue would be switch out. Everybody has certain foods that they like that are totally acceptable. Heavy up on those at the expense of the worst stuff that you're eating. And we know what the bad stuff is.
But
Gotta switch
jump
out.
back, Marty, and start with a normal person has 18% body fat. Jim's able to achieve 8% body fat. Jim, talk to us about that. So start with that intro, Marty. You say that intro so we can translate.
A normal individual is going to have 18 to 20% body fat. An obese person is going to be upwards of 30% body fat. Jim Steele routinely obtains 8.887% body fat percentile when he competes in bodybuilding, but the extreme measures that he has to go through to achieve that are past normal capacity.
And I think,
So Jim, translate that to real world.
right,
So
so what I've learned
yeah.
from that, of course, is the nutrition is super important. But what I really learned about that, and I started to use this with my athletes, and I use it with the special ops guys, is eat for what you're going to do. So I'm always thinking, I got to be on. So if I'm getting ready to coach 120 football players, I'm not going to eat a bowl of pasta before I go there because I'm going to take a nap. I have to be on all the time, So for this 2 hours, I can't get tired. I can't lose my focus. I can't be in the middle of talking and go, what the heck was I talking about? I have to be on. I have to be focused. So that meal before then, an hour beforehand, 2 hours beforehand, is heavy in proteins, some healthy fats like avocados and avocado oil, and even MCT. I'm a big MCT guy. And then when I'm settling down after that, that's when I would add some starchy carbs, but sweet potatoes, white potatoes, things like that, not a simple sugar, because now I'm giving my body that glycogen and things that I need, but I know that to focus, I can't do that. So I call it the zigzag, and Dr. Fred Hatfield talked about it years ago, is if you do the same thing for your workout, right? I'm gonna put, my first meal is gonna be light, but I'm gonna have some fiber, I'm gonna have some carbs in that meal, because and some protein. I want the carbs to protect the protein that I just ate in the morning, that kind of thing. And have a plan for each meal leading up to your big part of the day. So if it's your shift, and you got 8 hours or more sometimes, that snack machine is the worst thing you can do. Now,
If it's the wrong snack.
If it's the wrong snacks, exactly. Usually that stuff is so full of preservatives, you could leave it for 20 years and it'd still be okay.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, you always, and it just goes back to Hendo planning and Marty planning and your progression. Everything has to be planned out for the activity that you're getting ready to perform, right? The energy that you need for that activity and the focus.
And if
go ahead,
if you get a platter of food, let's say you take your tray up and they fill it full of the usual bits of everything, there's an order you can eat too. Eat your protein first, then eat your vegetable, then eat your fruit. And sit for a minute. If you have any room left, then eat your carbohydrate or whatever you have to eat.
Yeah, you
or
probably won't
go
even want
reload
it.
with
Yeah.
more meat.
Yeah.
So I'd always prioritize the order in which you eat. And eat slowly and properly chew your food and let it digest. Because usually by the time you get halfway through your meal, then you're okay. If you hurry up and stuff all the food down, then you're going to have too much food in that you probably don't need, and this is going to convert to fat.
And we're certainly what they're looking at right now is a series of different strategies, eating strategies, and different diet strategies. But I want to drill down to specifically, like you got to go out that day.
You want to know what exactly
Right?
what.
So I got to work 16 hours that day. I know I'm going in and I know I'm not going to go home for 16 hours. How can I be proactive to have a day where I can keep my energy up, where I can eat? I don't want to be hungry all day, but I don't want to eat crap all day either. I don't want it to impact my energy. So the three of you guys, give me some strategies around that.
I mean, are they able to pack their meals?
Yeah, sometimes.
I mean, we can go as far as the preparation. I mean, well, I always say this: good, better, best. If you want to be the best, then it takes a lot of preparation, and that's making your own meals. And it could be as simple as chicken and a vegetable. It could be as
and putting it in a Tupperware container and taking it
And
to work.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, Sundays I barbecue a giant pile of meat for the entire week.
and you use it for a week.
And I put it all in a bunch of containers. I put it in my fridge. So every morning when I'm going to work, I
That's-
grab it and I eat half of it in the morning, half of it after I work out. And I open up another one and I eat it, depending on how my day is. I need a portion of that. If I need a little sugar, I'll eat a little fruit. And it keeps me fueled all throughout the entire day.
So in general, what you're saying is natural foods, nothing man-made.
That's right.
As far as protein sources, what protein sources you can pack?
Chicken
Assuming
is great because it's cheap.
so, chicken,
Yeah, for
Beef,
sure.
beef.
beef.
I like
Yeah.
beef because I like the healthy fat out of it.
What else? What about fish?
We love fish. We love seafood. I love shrimp. We love,
So tuna. I mean, we're talking about stuff people can pack and
Yeah.
put in a bag.
And tuna's easy.
Yeah.
You know, any canned salmon. I was on a canned salmon kick for a while. That good healthy fat. You know, you have that with a vegetable. You know?
So what should they avoid working?
Simple sugars. Simple sugars.
So what's in?
carbs.
I mean, what's
processed
simple
food.
sugars?
Soda,
Soda's the worst. Candy, any kind of
Chips.
Yeah, it's like,
chips.
you know, it's funny because I had a Dorito the other day. My 10-year-old snuck a bag of Doritos from somewhere, and I'm like, "Where'd you get those Doritos?"
Give me one.
Let me have one. I haven't had one in about 15 years.
That's a reaction.
So addicted. I was like, because I've been eating those natural chips that we get from Whole Foods that taste like cardboard, right? I don't know, quinoa chips or some stuff. And I had one of those, and I was like, "Oh, what do they put on this? It's like crack."
That's all the MSG that they put
It's
on it.
amazing. So the choices, you know,
It's the
are so
same thing as
important.
I eat fast food like once a quarter, and I'll go there and I'll get a burger and fries and a Coke and be like, man, I haven't had this in a long time. I eat it, and man, this is good. An hour later, I'm like, oh, I feel horrible. And then I'm like, okay, I'll see you again in 4 months maybe when I forget.
Yeah.
The classic off-season bodybuilding strategy is that you stay relatively tight in your diet 6 days a week, and then you have not a cheat day, a cheat meal after
Meal and a
dinner.
dessert. Yeah.
Yeah, and you allow yourself, you want to eat some ice cream, eat the damn ice cream. But you get back on the wagon the next day.
And you know what? The more you do that, the worse you feel.
That's right.
And the faster you want to get back on the right track.
Right.
There's something I heard you guys say that resonates deeply with me, especially when I'm working inside in prisons, and that is when he talked about we want to hurry up and eat quickly, like hurry up, and you said slow it down, even slowing it down. So I think that's an immediate step somebody could do.
Yeah, no matter what food they're eating, and if they don't have the choice, by slowing it down, you're not gonna
It helps if it's
go to
delicious.
the bad food.
It really does. We really make an effort to make good food. We spend a lot of time cooking. I cook, he cooks. You cook? You know?
Sure.
Yeah. We work at it. We're good at it.
It's just all how.
Again, it's just being proactive.
Yes.
And it's
How-
setting these habits
Yes.
so that becomes a lifestyle.
Yeah. So to sum up, kind of the nutritional or the power eating kind of part of what we're offering and what we're suggesting folks be proactive to as they're building their plan on how to be healthy and good fathers and mothers and coaches and
That's right.
Sunday school teachers. Nutrition is a key part of that.
I wanted to toss out a quick topic, if I could. I don't remember exactly who was talking, but one of the reasons we were talking about eating every 3 hours, and one of the reasons I do that is to stay balanced. So, what do you offer them to stop them from rising and crashing?
Okay, so let me contextualize this by saying, if I have to work 16 hours, and I'm concerned, I'm not sure when exactly I'm going to eat. I'm going to try to eat on a regular basis, but I don't want to crash. I don't necessarily want to peak. I want to be able to be who I need to be. So talk about
You can have carbs.
talk about
It should
periodizing
be
food.
natural carbs. It should
Talk
be
about periodizing
stuff.
food during a shift.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
For me, I just eat, like I said, I prepare ahead of time my meals. I don't depend on my wife or anybody else to get it for me. Every Sunday and every Wednesday, I take 30 minutes out of my life and I prepare 3 or 4 days worth of meals. and I cut down. So my portions, in every single person on earth, if you eat a giant portion of food, you're going to crash. It doesn't matter what it is. So I eat very small portions. I'll get a little Tupperware container. I'll eat half of it, and then a couple hours later, I'll eat another half of it. I put olive oil on everything because I like that healthy fats going through my system, and I'm constantly fuels. And instead of just hammering coffees and sugars all day long, if I start to crash, I only have a coffee in the morning. If I start to crash in the afternoon, I'll eat a piece of fruit and get some of that healthy sugar into me.
Marty?
Yeah, I think you have to enjoy the food that you're eating. I think if the food tastes bad or terrible, that you're not going to stick with the diet. So it's almost like you almost need to seize your own culinary destiny by being able to prepare your own food. And a lot of people can't, and it's not that hard. It really is ABC. We take a lot of pride in being able to, roast a chicken, steam some shrimp, grill some asparagus. It's not difficult, and it's the most economical. And again, what's the alternative? Otherwise, you have to purchase every meal that you make. I mean, that's not going to end well.
Jim?
Yeah, the preparation. I mean, it's really simple. I mean, it is.
So, Jim, talk to us about foods they should avoid. Let's assume, so we have some facilities, when I were in Pennsylvania DOC, we didn't let people bring their own food in. So we had a salad bar at every place. The salad bar would have had proteins on it. Yeah. And then they'd get you'd go through a line, just like incarcerated people, right? And you'd be able to select whatever we fed. But true enough, most of the food we feed institutionalized people are very carb friendly and not very healthy.
Well, so what would it be like if all of a sudden they took the chicken nuggets out of there and put in, grilled chicken breasts or
so what strategy would you give officers though in the dining hall? Like, eat this, don't eat this. Just give us some.
I mean, honestly, man, you want to eat as naturally as possible. Yeah. You can't dig it up, you can't kill it, don't eat it.
So
but that's,
and like I said, in the food eating order.
And I don't know how realistic that is, but it's how good you want to be. You know what I mean?
We use supplements. Back when many years ago, when I worked a real job, I'd keep a jug of protein powder and a box of bars in my drawer, and anytime I needed something quick, you can create a 50-gram protein shake within 30 seconds. You can eat a bar when you're walking around, right?
So how would I love that?
I mean, of genuine health.
No. I love the notion that sometimes people are going to be on a block, and if you got something going on your block, I'm not going to have time to go to break. So talk about how can someone identify the right protein powder to make protein shakes, the right protein bars? What are the things they should look for in those?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. I've been associated with one supplement company my entire adult life because I met the man, I know the man made his own product, and I saw the raw ingredients that he made. Everything else out there is a crapshoot.
So, but we need to give them advice on.
I would like a protein powder that can be mixed with either water or milk.
The least amount of ingredients possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for supplements. We were looking some of the key phrases that they should be looking for in protein powders and protein bars, which are a good strategy for people working on a shift where they don't know when they're going to get relieved for break. They're not sure when they're going to eat. A good strategy would be using protein bars and protein shakes.
That'd be great.
So give them advice on how to find the right ones. Just as far as what to look for ingredients.
Yes, just look at the ingredients, and if you don't know what the ingredients is, look it up and see exactly what it is. But it should have a minimal amount of words there.
If it has more than 3 ingredients,
you look at
like casein.
You look at like milk. The sugar. If it's got 16 grams of sugar per serving, you want to stay away from that. You look at if it's got high fructose corn syrup. That's you don't want that in your product.
They have some good organic protein powders now. You can go with that. And
so you want with protein powders and protein bars, least amount of sugar.
Sport nutrition bar.
How much protein should they be looking at?
I'd say you got to have 15 to 20 grams at least in a bar, and then with those shakes, Usually 2 scoops is 40 to 50 grams of protein.
And then generally, for a person, if I wanted to be healthy, how many, talk about macros. How many macros would you recommend? I've heard you want 1 gram of protein per ounce of body weight you want to weigh or something like that.
Body weight.
I would say it's per pound of lean body weight. Something like that.
I would
instead
say
of body
that's
weight.
true if you're training. You don't need that if you ain't training.
Well, ostensibly, the people who are watching this are going to be doing some kind of
yeah,
training.
if you're training, you need to up your protein.
You know, if you do what Hendo said, and each meal you have, you make sure you get your protein first. And if you just get a palm size or a little bigger, you're probably 20 to 30 grams, and you're probably going to be all right. And then think about it. So instead of overloading and going at the end of the day, I got to have 200 grams or whatever right now, you just have a little bit each meal until now you've satisfied your requirements.
And how much better are they going to be by doing that compared to what they had been doing before they did that, right? Where they're waking up and having a juice and some pancakes.
Well, then you're playing catch up the whole day on your energy.
Exactly.
You're playing catch up the whole day.
And I would rather have a whole food than a processed food, even if it's a bar or shake. You know what I mean? But I would rather have a bar or shake from a vending machine than a candy bar, chips, or soda.
So as we wrap
use of regular food.
As we wrap this nutrition piece up, and again, we're going to put up a bunch of different strategies and diets and that kind of stuff. But just if the 3 of you, Doc, I won't put you on the hook for this, because your wife cooks for you.
Right.
I won't out you, but she does everything for you on the nutrition standpoint.
100.
But the 3 of you tomorrow you're going to work a 16-hour shift. You just got off a 16-hour shift. You came home, you did a little workout, you did what you needed to do. You're going to get some sleep. What's your strategy for nutrition tomorrow to get through another 16-hour shift? Start with Hendo.
So I would even back up more than that. I'm coming home from work. I would immediately start getting as much recovery as I can. Start resting, start breathing, listen to calm music. On my way home, transition mentally. I'm no longer at work. I'm now going to my home life.
You literally talk to yourself
I'm
like
talking to myself. When I walk through that door, what am I going to see? Is my family all going to be yelling at each other? Are they going to be peaceful sitting at
So
the
you
table?
prep yourself
Yeah,
with-
there's times that I'm walking up and I'm reaching for my doorknob at home, and I feel the exact same as I am going onto the battlefield, about to crack it open and see if there's a terrorist inside. I have to mentally focus, relax, breathe, calm myself down. I'm no longer my work person. Now I'm husband, father, chore keeper, everything that needs to get done in that house, because I got to keep the peace. I don't need more stress, right? So I breathe, calm myself down, crack that door, walk in, deal with whatever I'm dealing with. I stay as busy as possible. I walk through that door, hug everybody, immediately start taking out the trash, do dishes, whatever's needed to get done, I immediately start doing. There's no laying around in my house. It's not allowed. And immediately I'm going, okay, well, I got to start getting my food prep. I need to start getting ready. If I'm having a dinner, I always cook a little extra with my wife. I'll cook a little extra protein or whatever and prepare it for the next day. Or in most cases, I've already prepped it on Sunday for the entire week. So now I can shower, hurry up, get back to my recovery, calm myself down, start thinking about what my morning workout's going to be. At the end of the day, I can't get a good workout in. If I work out at the end of the work day and go and lay in bed, I'm still a little bit amped up for my workout. So I'm not getting the recovery I need. So I would rather get all my sleep on the front end and then wake up early on the back end and hurry up, knock out that quick workout, be refreshed, ready to start my day with full mental and physical clearance and as much recovery as possible.
And if you had to do 16 hours, you'd take 3 or 4 meals and some snacks with you?
Easily, I would take 3 meals and split them in half.
And what kind
as
of
far as
so,
snacks-
so what would be your breakfast?
A
lunch?
protein vegetable, and then I have a fruit as a snack, and little fruits. I like to mix my snacks. Like I like an apple with peanut butter, or a banana with peanut butter, or anything. So I got a healthy fat, and I got a sugar and a fruit. Right, that's healthy. And so I'll have those pre-packed and ready to go together. And so throughout the day, they're just right there, right by my hand, grabbing out my stuff. If I'm walking around, let's say if I'm in a place where I can't have a bunch of food on me, all I can have is something like a bar on me. I'll put beef jerky or something like that, and I'll look for the fattier ones. So I'm getting a protein and I'm getting some healthy fat in.
It's so similar to when we interviewed the kid who plays for the NFL. Hearing the Hendo talk and Justin Watson talk, who plays for the Chiefs, same kind of meal preparation, same kind of thought. If you notice, everything we're talking about, it doesn't happen by accident. It's all thought out. on how good you want it to be.
So
how
you-
good
It's
you
and
want
it's
to
the
be.
same thing with where you're talking about your mental strength. When he talks about planning it out, when we can align our expectations with the reality of what we're going to face, it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, and it takes such discipline, but the rewards. It's just like strength training, like I talked about before. Yeah, you're going to be sore, you may be tired. Once in a while, you may dread it. But I always say to myself, man, I'm going to feel so great when I'm done. You know, and then when I go to do my job, I can do it so much better. I never have to ask for help from a person in the world to pick something up or to put something on a shelf, and I never will. You know, lift until the day you die, always trying to do the right thing as far as your body goes. You know, it makes you independent.
So, you know, we've been talking about this kind of four-way fitness for guardians, right? Especially correctional staff. And we talked about the four ways being resistance training, cardio, nutrition, and brain training or mindfulness. So we've talked pretty exhaustively about resistance training. So let's talk about cardio. And Jim Steele. Jim,
Yeah.
you know, you ran, you know, the strength and conditioning coach for University of Penn, 37 teams, I believe, or something like that.
33, yep.
So talk about the importance of cardio
Yeah.
and give you know correctional staff some strategies, some ways they can work on cardio. Kind of talk about time frames, how much per day, and kind of the way they should think about having that cardio discipline, having one of those four things to be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so what I would do is when my staff and I would sit down and we would design, you know, the cardio or the conditioning is what we called it, programs. And really that's what it's going to be, conditioning for the officers. We would say, okay, what energy system are they going to be performing in? A baseball player is never doing distance running, but the culture of baseball, you got to do the lap out, you know, right?
Yep.
Doc, got to do the lap, got to do the lap, got to do another lap.
Yep.
Pitchers got to get their legs stronger, so you do laps. Well, it's the exact opposite. And they're never in that energy system, the endurance energy system, right? So what they should be doing is very short bursts, just like the game. It's very simple to think about without even getting into the physiology of it. It's just like, what do I need to do to survive, basically, as a soldier, as a police officer, as a corrections officer, in my worst situation? And then
So-
you're going to train a little harder than that.
So that's perfect. So
Right.
here's what our correctional officers need.
Okay.
One, our correctional officers need to be able to run, I'm going to say up to 400 yards and be able to fight when they get there. Two, they have to fight if they're on a housing unit. They have to be able to physically sustain that. And three, they have to be able to walk around and do rounds. So at the lowest level, they have to be able to do rounds for at least 8 hours, if not 16. But they do have to have that ability to run to an assistance call and still have endurance. So
They're out
that's
of breath. They're not getting they're not getting much oxygen. They're getting it, but they're out of breath when they get there.
Yeah,
Their lungs
of
are
course.
burning,
Yeah.
their legs are burning. So
Yeah,
you
so
want
what are some
to
specific
do
strategies around
you
that?
want to do anaerobic threshold training. So anaerobic threshold simply can be defined as the point at which my lungs and legs and everything are burning so much, and I'm getting nauseous and I'm going to throw up. Okay, you've reached your anaerobic threshold. Well, each time you train that threshold, it gets a little better and a little bit. You go a little further until you start to get that burning and that exhaustion. Too far and you're nauseous. So it would be very like training an MMA fighter to train. If I was going to train a corrections officer, their cardiovascular program would be sprints. It would be boxing. It would be Muay Thai.
so if they
things
can
on
find a
their own.
class like that in a community, you'd suggest.
Yeah, but it's as simple as, I mean, it's not as good, but you get home, today's not my lifting day because I lift 3 days a week, right? So I got my heavy bag set up. Now, I'm going to go 30 seconds as hard as I can. It's the progression. Next time I'm going 45. Next time I'm going a minute. You have to be without oxygen and you have to be able to recover.
So how would they know they're without oxygen?
You can't talk. You can't talk.
So
Yeah.
you want to do cardio to the point where you can't talk.
That's how you know you're in that zone that you want to train in, and you want to push that zone, right, more and more each time with you know periodization also. You know, you can't go crazy all the time. But
So Hendo, go ahead.
So one of the things that you don't have to have a bag or anything, you can just shadow box,
hard. Yeah.
or just do burpees, or just do some type of anaerobic exercise. One of the things that I do, I just shorten the amount of time in between sets. So I'll do a heavy set and I'll take 30 seconds off and I go right back in. So I don't let my heart rate come back down.
So heart rate is a good measure. So you would recommend that they measure their heart rate on a regular basis?
Absolutely.
So like some kind
Absolutely.
of technology that measures heart rate,
That's
you
right.
suggest. And so
And on the
for
reverse
someone
end,
to
when
improve
you're
their
recovered at
cardio,
night, you want to be looking at your heart rate also.
You're resting.
And then when you're resting heart rate, when you wake up in the morning to see if you fully recovered or not.
Also, how quickly your elevated heart rate drops back
Yes.
down to normal. If it
Is an
doesn't-
indicator of you being in shape.
I think it's 13 beats. If it doesn't drop 13 beats within a minute, you're likely candidate for heart problems.
And
so
also
as a
nice thing-
baseline, we want to start with making sure you're measuring this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because we
Oh,
want
yeah.
the thing about this program is it's not just some touchy-feely stuff that you're going to feel. We want you to be able to quantify the improvement in your health, and resting heart rate's a great way to do that, right? So we want to measure that, and then it's really important that you find a way, as Jim Steele said, is to replicate what you're going to ask your body to do from a cardio standpoint. So if you're a correctional officer and you may have to burst, and you may have to, even after you run or get to where you're going to get, when you're tired and you're already exhausted, you're going to have to expend yourself. So you want to do that in training versus the first time you ever figure out how to wrestle while you're tired is when you're wrestling with a bad guy while you're tired. That's not a good strategy, right? That's not being proactive.
You don't have to be on a stationary bike to do cardio. That's what Hendo was talking about. That's what Jim's talking about. Cardio can take many forms, okay? Also, the combination of cardio and nutrition, that's the body composition manipulator. Weight training is insignificant in terms of caloric. It does have a nice metabolic bump connected with intense weight training, but the main way that you reduce that 20% body fat down to 10%, which is when you get that bodybuilder look, is a combination of cardio and nutrition.
So talk about, Marty, you've in your book Purposeful Primitive,
Yep.
one of the framings, and this is a book I found when I was a young warden, right? I found a book and connected with Marty, and it was this crazy premise that made so much sense to me that, like, listen, if efficient means using less energy, you can do regular cardio, something like walking, make your body walk more inefficiently and you burn more calories. So we're talking about someone who's worked 16-hour shift. I'm not going to feel like going to do a heavy bag for a freaking hour or whatever.
But then but you got to ask yourself why you're doing it then. Or
well,
are they
you're doing it
just
because
for
I'm going to
stress
have to go
release?
in tomorrow and I may have to run 800 yards
Well, then I would
and then fight.
then I would do what Hendo said and cut my rest. So I would say, you know what? I only have time to train. I don't have time to do all of to train with weights, and I don't want to pick doing the sprints or whatever over doing the weights. So I would cut my rest periods down because the research is really strong that the cardiovascular benefits are just like sprinting.
So an approach to getting where you get
Now, wait a
cardio,
minute,
if you're
talking
gonna,
about cutting-
if you're hold on, Marty, Marty.
no, I don't know
An
what-
approach
I don't know.
to achieving some kind of cardio is reducing the rest period between doing the resistance training that we
Right.
talked about at length and,
What are you
and
saying?
reducing. Hold on, let me just finish this concept,
Yeah.
and then Marty, you can go different. But let's capture this as one. So an approach is reducing the rest period between your lifts to achieve both the anaerobic stuff and aerobic by not having as much rest periods.
Right, and the way you can do it. So if you're on a strength cycle, you're going to take. So let's say I have to do squats, right? And if I'm going to do my curls or I'm going to do my abs, that's what you want to cut the rest periods down for. If you have to hit a certain weight, or you say, okay, I'm just going to do a combination weight program. I'm just going to go a little lighter today and work on my cardiovascular. You could do that also. You don't want to take the strength away. There are times when you want to, sort of play with it a little bit.
So Marty, I want to jump back to your purposeful primitive and walking inefficiently. And so I've worked 16-hour shift. I'm not someone who's real comfortable. I haven't worked out my whole life, but I've been pretty consistent in walking. I'm tired. So help me understand how I can maximize. I got 30 minutes to walk. How can I maximize my walk to burn as many calories as possible?
We're big believers in the heart rate monitor. I've got a saying in the book that would you lift weights without knowing the poundage? Well, why would you do cardio without knowing the impact of the heart? Right? So the heart rate is everything. You go out and take your first walk and you walk as hard as you can for you want to walk 30 minutes, maybe you only make 15 minutes the first session because that's all you got. You walk hard for 15 minutes, you come back, you go, okay, I average 132 beats a minute. That comes to 83% of my age-related heart rate max. You log that. Now, the next day, you've gone 16 minutes, what did I say, 83%, and you burn 255 calories. The next day, you have a choice. You can either add 1 minute to the session and keep the intensity, right? Or you can keep the duration, go faster. Keep the 15, 16 minutes, but now I'm going to try to beat that. If you came in at, what did 132 age-related heart rate max the first session, you try to exceed that. But we periodize. That way we're able to stair step into ever better fitness levels. One little step at a time, right?
So one of the things Doc has consistently said it a bunch of times today, is meet people where they are. So you're saying with cardio, you don't have to be able to run a marathon.
No.
Start where you are,
Yeah, start where you
and
are.
get a heart rate monitor. Start figuring out your heart rate. So let's say today I'm going to do 15 minutes. I'm going to walk. I'm going to see what my baseline heart rate is.
And I'm going to
Now tomorrow I'm going to
I'm
commit to
crank
X number of sessions a week.
I'm going to crank it, John. I'm not going to just lollygag mall
Yep.
walk. I'm going to hit it.
I'm going to
15
hit
minutes.
it, and then tomorrow I'm going to do more. And more can be higher heart rate, further, more intensity. It can be more.
You can
but
extend the duration or you can increase the intensity.
Yeah.
Those are the two options. Extend the duration, increase the intensity. Keep the duration, increase the intensity. Extend the duration, one of the two.
So the vehicle of cardio is less important than the strategy and being proactive and having a plan. Hendo.
One of the things that you're saying about officers is that they're walking all day long. They're walking up and down through the cells or whatever at their job. So why would they train that on their off time?
Right.
They're getting those reps in.
Right.
So then they want to
Last thing they
do
wanna
short
do.
bursts,
Walking.
explosive type of movements, because that's the part that's missing. So if you take a look at your life and what aspects of it are missing that you need to augment,
Add what you're missing.
you add what you're missing.
Marty, talk about your sprint work. Like you came to starting to work for some sprint. Talk about that. Talk about who you connected with and all that stuff.
I'm sorry, John.
Your sprint work.
Well, I think it's important. It's
Dude, tell the dog story, because that gives the.
I know you said it already, but you
Yeah,
can
we
tell it
told
on
that.
one. Yeah, go ahead. Tell it on one.
Oh, well, I had a situation arise where I had to get it. I had to take off. I had a dog that I was babysitting, and the dog took off after another dog, and I had to go. And I had been a very good runner in high school. Played college, played high school football. Should have played college football, except for bad grades.
grades.
And I just assumed I was still a great runner. Well, guess what? 25 years later, when I went to run after that dog, I was like the Tin Man in the Wizard of Oz who hadn't been oiled.
We hadn't
And it was
imposed
like-
the demands.
And it was shocking. I was shocked by it. I said, well, it's the old phrase, use it or lose it. So I had to relearn how to run, but I did. And now, well, not in the winter. I don't sprint a lot. You can't do too much outside work in this environment in the winter. But over the summer in the good weather, I would work up to 2 sprint sessions a week. Sprinting is like weight training. You can only do like 5 to 8 all-out sprints.
So talk them
Past
through.
that, it's your
Talk them through a doable sprint workout. How many times a week they should do it, and just
I'd
talk them
start with
through
one.
how practical it is.
I'd start with 1, and I'd start with maybe 3 sessions, 3 sprints, Jim, 3 30s.
It depends on their
Yeah, it
fitness
depends.
level
Yeah,
starting,
so
but
much-
So
depends on
let's
the
so
individual.
let's just say let's start with 3 30s, but talk specifically through how you do the sprints, how you warm up. You, Marty, because I've done it with. Or start with you, and then Jim hop on, because I've done it with you, Marty, and you start with walking.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to. It's all graduated.
yeah.
You have to earn your walking credential. Then you could get your jog credential. Then we move up to let's break into a run credential. Then the all out. But you can hurt yourself. Your body can fly apart when you're running all out. All out means all out. This isn't Tabatas where we're doing 20-second. No, this is you've got for me, 40, 50 yards, and only the last 5 to 8 yards am I going all out. Everything up to that point is acceleration. I'm accelerating, and you can only hold your top end all out action for, I think Charlie Francis said 5 seconds.
So Jim, walk us through. So I'm a guy who's I'm asked to if one of my brothers or sisters needs help and they call for me, I need to sprint. If I'm being honest with myself, I could probably sprint a little faster. I'm just not in good enough shape. I want to sprint faster. I want to be there quicker. I want to be a better correctional officer, better partner for my people. How would I build that?
Well, I would train those guys for their sprints the same way I train the tier 1 guys, the NFL guys, or the college guys. We're going to do a generalized warm up.
So what does that look like for me?
It's used probably 20 yards, something like that. You'll do leg kicks, you'll do shuffling, you'll do karaoke, you'll do some backpedaling. All I'm doing, and you're getting my body ready, but I'm getting my mind ready for what I'm getting ready to do also.
So I'm basically going very slow. I'm doing a bunch of different movements. Karaoke's like switching your feet, you're jogging, you're
We
doing
actually
high
would start
legs.
off, just to get down to the nitty gritty, here's what we would do. We'd start on the ground first. We start ground-based stuff first. We'd warm up our hamstring, we'd warm up our low backs, a lot of leg swings over and back, over your head and back, on your belly, touch your foot to your opposite hand, things like that. Now you got a general body warm up. Now you're warm enough to start jogging and doing things a little more intensely. That's when you would, let's picture a football field, get on the goal line, 20 yards of those moving mobility exercises, skipping. But it's all at like half speed to 3/4 speed. And
So you're wanting them to, so they're going to loosen their body up first so they don't hurt themselves.
Right.
And then they're going to start doing different movements that maybe they're not used to, but they're going to start putting their body in a different position.
Right, and then it's probably 10 different exercises, okay, where they're going the 20 yards, and I increase the intensity, and I save the best for last. So the last 4 of them, we're doing 3/4 sprints. We may do a forward roll in a sprint, something like that. Now we're really, we got a little sweat going. Now we're really ready to go, and then you do your all-out stuff. Now, somebody could say, well, when I'm on duty and I have to go to an emergency situation, I can't warm up. Yeah? Well, it's sort of like we talk about with the deadlift. So you can't train a rounded back deadlift or you'll hurt your back. But you try to make all the muscles around your low back and everything strong enough to withstand a bad rep. We always say you only got so many bad reps in you.
Yep.
Right? So you're going to train and not actually, doing a warm up, but training yourself to be able to handle those times. It's not that often, that's what I'm trying to say, where you're not having to do it often, but you got to do it, right? And so by training yourself in those full speed things, you don't actually have to, I don't even know if we should talk about this, but you should be able to go from 0 to 100 by doing the training that I'm talking about without actually going right into it without a warm up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because you've trained your body
let me restate that,
to handle
because
that.
what you're saying is doing this training. Ideally, when you're in training, you want to take the time and you want to warm up and this and that, and that will put you in a position when you don't have time to warm up.
Yes.
That your body won't be going, "What the hell are you doing to me?"
Right,
Because
yes.
they're used to that, and so even if they're not going to be at their best, they're going to be a hell of a lot better than they've ever been because they've repped this and they're used to that. Go ahead.
Consistency is why this is so important. I only work out maybe 30 minutes a day, but I work out 7 days a week. And my body is used to constantly working out. Marty and I talk about getting out of bed strength. At any given moment,
That's what I was
can
just
get out
going
of
to
bed,
say.
and
Roll out
I-
of bed
and I-
strength.
And I can get up and I can lift double my body weight at almost any given time. Or I can sprint, or I can do anything that's necessary to be a good human being to rescue somebody, whether it's on the street, it's at my home, or it's at my job.
And that's an important question to ask yourself. What can I do right now? What can I do right now? If stuff goes down, what can I do right now?
Well,
We
I
don't
think
have
the
time to
salient-
do a foam roller.
Right.
Listen, I think the salient question, and the reason why, frankly, the reason why I'm developing this for the folks I'm talking to in the field is because if we were sitting in a room with 100 correctional officers and I said, you have to fight for your life for the next 60 minutes, 60 seconds.
Are you ready?
And this is a question that is not a crazy scenario. So, I mean, the reality of the circumstance for the vast majority of correctional staff if there was 100 correctional officers from any system, any jail in the world, and I asked them this question: if you had to fight for your life for 60 seconds, do you have the cardio? Do you have the strength? Do you have the emotional intelligence? Do you have the mindset? Do you have the strategy and the skills to save your life and the life of your colleagues? And if they were being honest, the majority of that room would not raise their hand. And that's and listen, there may have been a time when the majority raised their hand, but if we had a bunch of elite athletes and we said, over the last 2 years, we're going to ask you to work 16-hour days, 3 of the 5 days of the week. We're going to add all this stress to you, and you're not going to meet your optimum. Can you fight for your life? There wouldn't be enough hands up that would make us feel good. And that's the reality that they're facing right now. There's officers, they're watching this in roll call right now. There's people who may walk out of this room and have to fight for their lives. Right. And they don't have the skills to do it. And for a lot of us, what you're talking about sounds like it's not even possible. Maybe Carl Lewis can do it, or maybe who is Usain Bolt, or maybe these Michael Jordan, one of these elite athletes can do it. But can I do it? And you're telling me that I can find a way to do cardio, resistance training. You can help me understand how to use my brain to be an asset, not a deficit. Is that real? I mean,
not only is it real, but I live it.
Yeah,
I live it regularly, and I'm not even in that job anymore. But the one thing that I can't stop is aging. Right? I'm going to age. So how do I mitigate aging, and how do I have the best longevity out of my body? Because I'm a father. I got children I got to look after, and I got to be there to protect them. I got to be there to provide security for them, and be able to play and be a functional father. And so the way I do it is I didn't change anything from when I was in the SEAL teams to what I do now. Is because it's just my lifestyle, and it's a micro amount of my life. It's 30 minutes a day. It's little to no time of my day. I don't sit there and mess around on social media. I prioritize my workout. I prioritize my food. I prioritize my planning and being proactive, so that the rest of my life is fluid and I have the best longevity possible.
So I heard you say one time listening to you talk that every Navy SEAL starts the day with a certain routine.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, because we have the habits, right? Every Navy SEAL wakes up in the morning and goes to the gym and works out, because that sets the tone for our entire day. It helps us to start our day where we've already worked out, we've already got all that neurochemistry that Marty talked about earlier, and it sets us in this good, clean mindset that I'm ready to attack the day, and whatever comes, so be it. And at the end of the day, I've gone so hard throughout my day, and I've focused so hard throughout every aspect of the day, that all I'm doing at the end of the day is focusing on my recovery, so that the next morning I can reset. Because sometimes, let's face it, we'll have a bad day. Sometimes maybe something will hurt, you'll ache, all the other outside entities come in these concentric rings of challenges that we go through in life. And I just got to, at the end of the day, go mentally reset, breathe, calm myself back down. Tomorrow morning when I wake up, it's going to be fresh, and I'm going to be ready to go again.
And that's your time. That's
my time. That's my time.
Yeah. So Doc, talk about mindfulness, and we talked about, really what we're talking about is creating armor, right? Giving individuals the ability to arm themselves, right? To protect themselves, however you want to call that. How do they do that to their mind? Let's talk about mindfulness, because the consistent thing with elite athletes, with elite warriors, with elite human beings is that their minds are strong, and it all starts with the mind. So Doc, you've spent your entire career with this, and all of you, what distinguishes you and why you're at the top of your field is because the way you think, your self-talk. So each of you just kind of vibe off mindfulness, and how the guardians we're asking to run our jails and prisons, the folks in Philadelphia, the folks in Texas, the folks in all the states out there, talk about mindfulness and brain training, and how they can arm their mind to make themselves better everything.
So mindfulness can be a buzzword, right? People say, "What is this mindfulness?" Is it like Hendo referred to, like people might think it's sitting up on a mountaintop or whatever? That's mindfulness is simply awareness. It's simply awareness. Being mindful is being aware of yourself, aware of your thoughts. For instance, are your thoughts going 100 miles an hour? Are they jumping from this tree to that tree? Or are you in control of your thoughts? It's being aware of your presence. So in any communication, we all play a role. So what impact do you have in that communication? What impact do other people have on you? So it sounds overwhelming, but the reality is the more you can learn to be present, the easier mindfulness becomes. So one thing I teach people is this. I played baseball in college, and I remember as an outfielder, I was a lot skinnier back then, but as an outfielder,
We had to notice.
as a center fielder, if a ball is hit straight towards you, a line drive, if you dive in for it, it could go over your head. If you run back right away, it could fall forward. So you learn to drop your energy. And that metaphor, that motion stuck with me my whole life, because that's what mindfulness is to me. If I approach a situation, I almost drop my energy psychologically, and I say, okay, let me just take a moment to take this in. How am I coming across to others? How are others impacting me? What's going on in my mind? And the more we practice it, the better we get
So
it.
what's the definition of mindfulness? Like what would
Awareness. I think the simplest definition is awareness. It's awareness. And it seems like, it's a lot to be aware of, but it's practice. It's practice. So for instance, I've been married for 22 years. In every interaction with my wife, I could be 100% right, and I usually am. But it's how I come across that could be completely wrong, and I kid. But it's how I come across that makes an interaction. So being aware of that, then I can say, what role am I playing? So I think this also begins, probably if I could reach in the hearts of everybody listening and watching this and have them feel this part of mindfulness, it would be this. When you have any given experience in any moment, to be able to say, my mind wants to match my body. So in every given moment, if I feel agitated, I might make up a story and say, well, it's got to be because of you. You're making me agitated. When if I step back and I have this mindfulness and awareness, I go, maybe I'm agitated because I have low blood sugar right now. Maybe I'm agitated because I feel a little bit more stress. Now I don't need to create a story. And to me, that is psychological freedom, when you don't have to create a story just to match how your body's vibing.
So let me, Hendo, one of the things I heard you talk about is in your training through your nonprofit of law enforcement.
Yeah.
You talk about them taking a deep breath and getting to a place where they can make a conscious decision and not be in their emotions. So Doc calls it tapping the limbic system, right?
Sure.
And draining the water and getting to a place where you can make a decision. Talk about, mindfulness kind of sounds like, Doc, I think you hit it well, like this, what do you call it, bro science or frou-frou stuff or
Fun
whatever,
word.
woo-woo, what do you call
Yeah.
it? But Hendo, talk about practical application. I mean,
Sure.
there's almost probably no one who anyone knows who's been in more situations where you had to get to a place where you had to do something that was highly intense, that the outcomes were literally on your ability to be in the moment, be aware, and get it done. Talk about how you can use that.
Well, the key part of mindfulness, and instead of using mindfulness, we need to say the word awareness. And when he talks about awareness, he's talking about self-awareness. So he's talking about know your biases, your triggers, things that are stressors, and he's talking about being present. The past is all depression. The future is all anxiety. So just live in this present moment and affect what you can affect. The next step is self-management. Once you're aware of all these things, and you can sit down and write down what makes me angry, what triggers me, what are my biases, what are my preconceived notions, write them all down, and then ask your peers, hey, have you seen me gone off in a while? Have you seen me lose my temper? Have you seen me act irrationally? Write those down. Your peers are one of your best sound boards that you can use. Mm-hmm. And then once you get all those down, then go, okay, well, how do I manage myself? And almost all of it comes back down to now awareness of breathing, around awareness of resetting myself from that sympathetic to that parasympathetic nervous system. And the way I always get there is through breathing. At the end of my day, I'm doing that slow 4 seconds in, slow 4 seconds out type of pattern to completely relax myself, have awareness. I do that diagnostics check from head to toe. Do I have any injuries? Am I okay?
Can you walk us through that? Walk us
Sure.
through your routine. I mean, very specific.
So when I'm trying to just recover and get into a relaxed state, I breathe in through my nose for 4 seconds.
Pause for a second. Just look the whole time at the camera like you're talking to someone
Okay.
and you're describing to them your routine.
So when I'm looking for self-management through breathing in a recovery phase, so I don't have any stressors around me, I'm laying down in bed, I'm breathing in through my nose for 4 seconds, I'm taking that air in, and think of it like your body is a receptacle, and I'm filling it full of water through your nose. It's going in, the air is going in, going all the way down and filling from the bottom up. So I'm taking the air all the way down into my pelvis, and I'm exhaling through my mouth or nose, but I'm exhaling it all back out. So your diaphragm lowers. So really when you inhale, your stomach should push out. And when you exhale, your stomach should come in and all the way back up, because that's how the diaphragm works. The diaphragm cuts you in half. It pushes down when it's expanding, and it comes up when the air is coming out, right? So getting into this flow pattern of 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, back and forth, is going to relax your entire body and transfer you very quickly into that parasympathetic nervous system. Now, in combat, when I have to quickly reset, I'm stepping off a helicopter, rounds are flying everywhere, I got to run to this door. As I'm running as fast as I can, my stress is up, I'm kind of hyperventilating, I'm losing oxygen. I know that once I put my hand on that doorknob and pop it open, I'm in a hostage rescue situation or whatever, or I'm going against a bad guy who's using his own family as human shields in front of me. I've got to calm myself down as quickly as possible. The way I do that is 1-2 breathing. I take the air in through my nose for 4 seconds, and I exhale for 8. And how I exhale for twice as long is I either purse my lips or I put my tongue on the bridge of my mouth. So I inhale for 4 seconds, exhale. 3 of those quickly puts me into that parasympathetic nervous system. So as I'm walking towards the door, I'm breathing in out through my mouth, 1-2 breathing. By my 3rd breath, I'm cracking that doorknob. Now what's happened? I put myself in that parasympathetic nervous system, but the neurochemistry is already shooting through me, so I'm hyper alert, hyper aware, but I'm nice and calmed in a relaxed state. As I push the door open, I'm nice and calm, and I go in and I've maximized the amount of oxygen in my brain so I can use the best decision making during that critical time.
So you're telling me I'm a member of the cell extraction team. I'm the point man on the cell extraction team.
That's right.
Your recommendation to me, and what you're saying is, if I want to be at my best,
Yep.
as I'm walking to that door,
Yep.
as I'm hearing the briefing and all this stuff,
Right.
I should be concentrating on my breathing.
During your briefing, you want to be doing that 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Relax, recover, get as much rest as you can. Pay attention to what's happened. Listen to the contingencies. If we enter a cell, if somebody attacks from here, we're going to do this. Somebody attacks from here, we're going to do that. If other people come, we're going to do this. We have to have good situational awareness around us. The only way that I can get there is by maximizing the oxygen in my brain. So I need to get calm, reset. As I'm getting up, gearing up, I'm thinking and playing it out, visualizing everything through my mind. As I'm moving towards that cell, now I'm going to that 1-2 breathing. In through my nose for 4, out for 8, all the way up until I'm standing by. Once I crack the cell, I make entry. I've maximized the oxygen in my brain. I've already got that norepinephrine kicking through my body and amping me up, but I'm calm and set, and I can now move like a superhuman. I can think quickly, I can react quickly, I can think clearly, and I'm nice and calm, so I can escalate and, more importantly, quickly de-escalate the situation as quickly as possible and gain control of that situation.
And the other layer to that that's so critical for staff to understand is the person who's in that cell with that whack or that shank, or has his mattress over the door,
Sure.
has all kinds of stuff in there ready to gas you. Trust me when I tell you, he's not box breathing. He's not been trained in controlling his emotions. He's not been trained physically, mentally. He's not done resistance training and the stuff. And he's certainly not in that moment concentrating on making sure that his mind is in the perfect position to both, and understand, and I want to highlight this, to both escalate when you need to, because we're in a position where we're always outnumbered. And when we have these situations, we have to be able to handle it, period. There's no one else to call. But also, as important, de-escalate when we've handled it.
That's right.
And I think that's a great lesson. And the cool part, it actually literally gave me goosebumps, is when Hendo's talking about this, and the thing about what makes this different is he's not talking about this theoretically. Right. And I certainly appreciate, like, we're all getting tense hearing you talk about that, because we know that you literally applied this at a place that you probably can't tell us about, in a situation that we may have read about, we don't know. And so appreciate that. And the two of you, just go with the mindfulness and just kind of vibe off a couple minutes on.
I don't know if I could top that.
Well, nobody can fucking top that. That's clear.
I don't even know if I can add.
Okay, the mic is laying on the floor. It's been dropped.
Oh, what's
twice.
amazing
I
is
got
that you
one
can
more
be
point.
Go ahead.
aware enough to do that. That's
So
the
one more
amazing
point
thing.
is if I'm doing, let's say, a cell extraction, and I quickly enter, and I'm being as aggressive as possible to gain control of the suspect, and the whole time I'm talking, and when I'm talking, I'm saying, easy, I'm in this calm voice, calm down, relax, we're going to get you out of your cell. And really, I'm not even so much talking to him, I'm talking to my own ego. And I'm controlling myself, controlling my own emotions, staying calm. Once I start escalating, once I start yelling, then I'm hyperventilating. I'm minimizing the amount of oxygen that's getting to my brain. I'm also escalating the person who's in a cell. I'm also escalating the guys that are around me. Now we're all ramping up, and we're all thinking irrationally because we haven't maximized the oxygen to our brain. So I'm calm, I'm talking to them, I'm quickly gaining control using good techniques, but I'm still trying to de-escalate the situation to get it back down. I can ramp up at any time, but I want to be able to quickly bring it back down. I do it all through even conversation. I've been known in combat that when we're in a heavy shootout, that I'll come across in a jovial, kind of quiet, calm voice. Because there's no point in me yelling into the radio, because it's going to escalate the situation worse than it needs to be. What I need is everybody to kind of mentally reset, no matter where they're located, calm themselves back down, and deal with this problem in a methodical manner.
So, Doc, take that from the battlefield to the block.
Well-
right? And take what
pay
he
for that
said,
kind of knowledge.
right? He's talking about, like, he gets on the radio, you got all this stuff going on. Take it to the block. Because we've been there,
Right.
we've talked to officers before and after. Take that
The
to
most
the block.
key thing he just said was, I talk to my ego. Like, he keeps his ego in check. So when you look at a warrior of that status saying that, I think that is absolutely inspirational for our officers, for officers who are watching this, to say, it's important to check that ego. I mean, mindfulness, that's a huge part to be aware of, to be mindful that my ego is getting the best of me. How many times when people, this is one of the reasons why people who aren't involved in corrections have a difficult time understanding what correctional staff goes through. I mean, think about it. People who have been convicted of doing really horrific things to others sometimes agitate and go right at officers, go right at staff, saying really awful things to them. So they're testing that ego. So to be able to say, when you're at this level, I'm constantly challenging my own ego, that's it. That's what makes the ultimate warrior. That's what makes somebody be at their absolute best, when they're not controlled by their ego, but they're able to actually be aware of it and then even control it. That's phenomenal.
So talk to some strategies about detachment or whatever you call that.
Yeah, so for me, I believe at the heart of what I do with yield theory is have people challenge their own egos. So our ego is our sense of who we are. You know, we know that we're not our things, our possessions. If you lose your favorite necklace, it doesn't make you less of a person. You might be upset you lost your necklace, but it doesn't make you less of a person. And in the same way, we're not our things, we're also not our thoughts. So any given moment, any rational human being is going to say, hey, as long as I'm alive, I still have more to learn. And if we really do believe that we have more to learn, then that means that we don't have all the answers, which means in any given moment we could be wrong. That means we need to be aware to challenge our egos. Even when we think our egos are right, we go, wait a minute, maybe there's more to this story. And that's why probably the most hands-on anger management technique I can give people is simply the word maybe. Think about the next time you're angry and your ego's overwhelming, you're getting ready to do that cell extraction, or you're getting ready to do whatever it is. Maybe you're arguing with your spouse, and you go, it's definitely this, and instead you infuse the word maybe. Maybe there's more to the story than I'm seeing. Maybe I don't have the whole picture right now. Maybe there's something else. And in that maybe, here's what happens neurologically. It's kind of cool. You go from the emotional limbic system of this is definitely what's happening, and the word maybe has us cognitively think about it. It shifts us from the limbic system, center of our brain, to to the frontal cortex, higher level thinking. So now we have an opportunity to step back, take that deep breath, do what Hendo said, challenge that ego, talk to it. And it's hands-on, it works.
All right, so enough of mindfulness. I want each of you to talk about how these 4 components, resistance training, cardio, mindfulness, power eating, how that's the core 4 that human beings need to do to live a healthy life. So just whatever length of time, I don't care. Who wants to start? Jim, can you just...
Yeah, I mean, the strength training aspect of it.
Just hit all 4, but hit all... Look, there's 4, because what our framing is that we're going to give you tools in these 4 areas that are going to help you optimize your life. So anything you hit, I'll just pull them.
What? I don't understand the question.
This whole thing is based on 4
I know
components.
that.
Right.
But
Resistance,
what
mindfulness.
What do you want us to do? Do you want
I
us
want you to do a commercial for the 4 components and why it's
describe
important for
each of
somebody.
the
Yeah.
4
No. Why it's important. You're selling the 4
right.
These are the 4 things that someone needs to do to live the life that we want to
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, well, they all are very important. Strength is very important because it's the foundation. Strength makes your muscles stronger, it makes your tendons stronger, it makes your ligaments stronger. It helps you recover faster from a tough day on the job. It helps you be able to create force more at each rep that you do. It's a stress reducer, big time, right? The cardiovascular is like I talked about. You have to be able to do something cardiovascularly that replicates what you're going to do on a job, right? So it's important because that's along with the strength. I can't be strong as heck and get there if I can't get there or if I can't handle with my business once I get there because I'm not cardiovascularly fit. What good is it, right? So you have to have that component. And then nutrition is how you feed those muscles and you feed that cardiovascular system. The nutrition is your energy to supply for all those things, you know. What's the other one?
mindfulness. But if you don't have anything for it, you don't have to hit anything.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff they talked about is
They hit it pretty
revolutionary
well.
to me.
Yeah, that's why I cut it off. We
So-
can't add to it.
You have to have 4 elements. You have to have cardiovascular training element. Obviously, we need to be fit. You have to have a weight training element. We've got to be strong. Strength makes people resilient. It's critical. Okay, strength is the king of biomotor attributes. You have strength, speed, endurance, flexibility, agility. Those are the 5 biomotor attributes. Strength is the king because strength bleeds over into speed. There can be no speed without strength. Okay, so strength is the boss of the biomotor attributes. However, as Jim pointed out, there's no point being able to bench press 500 pounds if you get gas going up 3 flights of stairs, which I've seen. I've known many super strong guys who were terribly unfit, and most of it tied to their nutrition. You've got to have clean fuel. You've got to have fuel that the body was designed to run on. The body was not designed to run on refined carbohydrates, corn, all this chemical. We're poisoned. We need to detox, okay? When you detox, you feel better, your energy is better, everything's better. The brain train is all the aspects that are connected to the transformative process. You have, heading into a workout, classic, I've been a student of Soviet autosuggestion since the time I was 14 years of age. You use autosuggestion, a movie repeating over and over, heading into the workout. The visualizations can be so strong that you have to repress them a little bit because you can have a premature adrenaline ejaculation. You shoot your adrenaline off in the car ride over because the visualization's so real to you. Now, you've got to keep that under control. You have to nurture it. And when you get to that top set, as you're working through your sets, you preserve that precious psyche for the top set, right? Then you let it go. Then immediately, you have to decompress. You have to learn that. You can't shoot your wad on the first set of a workout. You've got to be able to peak and then decompress, and it has to be instantaneous. Okay, we learn that in the weight room. All right. After an intense workout, we have an incredible, wonderful, we call it the post-workout afterglow or the glow state. And you hit a certain intensity level, and you have a hormonal tsunami of all these hormones that are released, and it gives you this beatific feeling that anyone who's really, really, really trained hard knows what I'm talking about. And you just sit there, and it's enough just to be. And it's characterized by an alertness. It's a hyper alertness, but it's also a lack of thought. Okay,
Emptiness.
But it's alertness. It's not somnolent. You're not falling asleep.
No.
It's not dullness, and that's what we crave. That's what keeps us coming back for more.
It's addictive.
It's that post-workout afterglow, man. That is addictive. And stress. What's stress? What?
Yeah.
Because you've knocked it out of yourself. Like I said earlier, it's like throwing a bucket of water on a computer. Short circuit that overactive mind. The reason that we're stressed out, there's no stress if there's no thought. If you keep talking to yourself and talking to yourself and talking to yourself and talking to yourself and talking, that wears your ass out. That's what meditation, all schools of meditation, what they intend to do is they intend to stifle the inner talker, the thinker. Krishnamurti called it the observer. And it's just chattering all the time. You cannot perceive reality if the inner thinker is active. You have an inky film that prevents you from observing what is. If you're preoccupied and you're thinking, okay? It takes years to get to that point. But hard training actually puts you in an advanced meditational state. It took me 30 years to figure that out, that I was doing what I had been seeking. I'd been seeking it in meditation. Finally, when I got it in meditation, I was like, oh, I've already been here. Right.
Since you were 12.
Since I was 12. Right. And now the game is, once we hit this glow state, how do we extend it? What do we do? How do we nurture it? How do we keep that thing going, right? So that's my take on mindfulness, not the fall mindfulness. Christopher Hitchens called mindfulness the folk religion of the secular elite. It can be a little too hip, a little too plasticky. There's a deeper meaning to mindfulness, and it can be accessed through intense training.
A guardian has to optimize and focus himself in the 4 areas of, mind, body, diet, and cardio. And when it comes down to it, it's the why. Why do we do it? In the SEALs, they say, well, if we're going to define it, we'd say you guys are tough. Well, okay, yeah, we're tough, but that doesn't matter. What matters is if we're capable. And by putting those 4 elements together, if I look at it from a micro level of being a father, being a good, dependable, reliable workmate, being a good member of my community and a good member of this country, I have to have those 4 elements that all come together in unison to tie me to be an incredibly capable person from the micro to the macro level.
25 years ago, I developed a theory of communication that centers on meeting people where they are. But if you really think about it, that begins with meeting yourself where you are. When it comes to your mind-body connection, these are absolutely intimately connected. Once you're aware of your thoughts, once you become aware of how your thoughts impact your body, how your thoughts impact what you say, and how you interpret what others say to you, everything changes. So begin with the mind-body by being aware. What are your thoughts? I call it the observer. What is your body? What is your ego saying? What's your true self saying? Once you make that connection and really understand it, everything changes.
The process of building a program is something I'm real familiar with because I did it at the University of Pennsylvania. I've done it at different high schools and universities where I had, 1,000 athletes, and we have to be organized. You have to be on the ball at all times. Now, I coached for 20 years in an Ivy League school, and I used to say, Ivy League kids will run through that wall. They just want to know the angle they got to hit it at. They got to know what the boards are made of and stuff like that. So I always told my assistants to never say you know something that you don't. Just say I'll get right back to you on that. Never try to pull the wool over people's eyes. So we always try to be as real as possible with all of our athletes. Going along with that, you want your program to be as real as possible. So our philosophy, Marty's book is Purposeful Primitive. We get down to the primitive nuts and bolts of the whole thing, where we focus on just the basic exercises to get the most bang for your buck. When we talk about this organization of the workout, we always want to start at a level that everybody's comfortable with. Obviously, you have different experience levels, and you want to coach to that experience level. One thing that we do that is sort of unique is we individualize every program. Okay, so everybody will start off learning the basic exercises, what we talked about today: the squat, the bench, the deadlift, the press, right? But you may have a particular weak point, and this goes along with some of the online training that we do, or with the tier 1 people. I want to know their weak points, what they need to work on, right? So that's something that's going to be involved in the program after you get the basic skill development of the lifts. Now we're going to individualize, and it's not something that has to take forever to do. You know, I can ask you, what do you think your weak point is? Or I can do a test on you and say, oh, that left knee's coming in on your squat. Hey, we're going to do some step ups. Hey, we're going to add 3 sets of this. That's what I mean by individualizing. It's not that time consuming and that intricate. It's just little things by experience that we've gleaned from years of it. And you know, you want to build slowly, and we want to do workouts that aren't something that people dread. Right? So we don't want to be in there for hours at a time, man. If you're in there for an hour, you're fooling around. You got a 10-minute warm-up, 5 to 10-minute warm-up. You got your basic lifts for 20, 30 minutes. You got a 5 to 10-minute cool down out. And it can be even quicker than that if the situation calls for it. The development of the program is, what you want to do is you want to find out, you want to make it unique to the situation. So if you're in a place where, hey, listen, I can only afford 30 minutes here with my guys, I can only afford, 20 minutes with these guys, then we can go, as a program development, we can, I'm trying to figure out a word for glean. It's not gleaned. It's, we can gear the program to fit your needs. So it's not even individual. It may be a place that we have to figure out, as far as the time limit. So,
well, why don't you say we can adapt?
Yeah,
to
we can adapt
your unique circumstances.
Yeah, and we can adapt to any of your unique circumstances as far as training, as far as time, as far as equipment. I mean, we're talking about anaerobic threshold training. You don't even need weights, right? You want to get stronger, and you're at a beginning level. And you don't have the weights. You can do with body weight stuff, and eventually progress to weights, things like that. So. It's a basic program where we have some foundations that you can't get away from, which is our lifts, right? There's some basic foundational lifts when you get into the lifting part of it, but it's malleable to individuals' needs. If you're looking for help in strength and conditioning for your people, I think we're the way to go because we have so much experience. I mean, 30 years, 50 years, all down the line, and we know how to do it in a succinct, successful way.
My resistance training knowledge base was completely upended when I trained with a fellow named Mark Chalet for 6 years. Mark showed me how little it was possible to do and still get maximal results. He called it getting the mostest for the leastest. Basically, what Mark would do is 1 time a week, he would work up to a single rep in the squat and the bench press on Monday. Thursday, he would come up, work up to a single rep in the deadlift. That was it. He didn't do anything else, nothing. And yet, he squatted 1,000, deadlifted 880, world record holder, world champion, and he opened my eyes to how little could be done and still make progress. So from those 3 lifts, we created this nucleus of what is the most condensed amount of resistance training that we can do. Now, we came up with 4 lifts. We added the overhead press to the 3 power lifts because we wanted another lift on your feet. We wanted a push lift where you stand on your feet. We like our athletes to be on their feet. But what we also discovered was that you could compress, because unless a man is deadlifting 880, he doesn't need a lot of sets to get to his top set. Typically, you can get to a top set in let's say 3 to 4 sets. Well, If you're doing 3 to 4 sets in the squat, the bench press, the deadlift, the overhead press, that's a total of what? 4, 8, 12, 16 sets. 16 sets can be done in 30 minutes. Now, because we only do each lift once a week in this most minimalistic of programs. Now, I want to say this uber nucleus can be expanded, right, depending upon circumstance. It's expandable and contractible. When we were working with some of Hendo's guys, what we would find is that when they were stateside and pressed for time, they would go minimalistic. But when they were deployed and had time, then Jimmy was giving them more advanced, longer routines. Minimalistic frequency is once a week, and again, this is not a treading water strategy. We train people to this day. I train regular folks, neighborhood people in this neighborhood to this day that train once a week and are competitive powerlifters doing extremely well in a regional basis. Once a week training is a proven track history in powerlifting. So in terms of frequency, you can get by with as little as once a week. In terms of the menu, you can get by with as little as 4 exercises. Again, each one is a compound multi-joint movement. These require groups of muscles to work in concert in order to accomplish the muscular task. This is the opposite of an isolation exercise, which hones in on a single muscle. So that's the overarching strategy. And again, this is minimalistic. The phrase that we use, purposefully primitive, that refers to this idea of let's take all these fundamentals and let's re-examine them. One of the things that happens when we talk to the most experienced of athletes is that they've forgotten the fundamentals that they had learned to begin with. So we loop them back around to the old school. So again, in terms of normal folks, this is hugely important because it shows how little you can do and still get maximum results.